Chapter 804. Origin of the Azure Dragon. All of them are Emperor Realm experts? Zhuowen's heart trembled. There were more than 30 experts in the canyon. In other words, there were more than 30 Emperor Realm experts in front of him. Moreover, among these 30 experts, the weakest was comparable to Emperor Qing, and the strongest was close to a saint. How could Zhuowen not be shocked? In the Qing Xian Empire, Emperor Qing was the only Emperor Realm expert. It could be seen how difficult it was to advance to the Emperor Realm. However, there were more than 30 such experts in front of him now. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that these 30 Emperor Realm experts had calm expressions on their faces. They raised their heads slightly, as if they were facing death calmly. Who killed more than 30 Emperor Realm cultivators at the same time? Looking at the corpses of more than 30 experts in the canyon, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with doubt. Emperor-level experts were not so easy to kill. Moreover, there were more than 30 Emperor-level experts here. Even a saint might not be able to kill them instantly. This space experienced a fierce battle back then. Even Emperor-level experts fell. I wonder if the master of the Azure Dragon Hall is still alive. Xiao He carefully observed the corpses of more than 30 experts in the canyon, and said indifferently, "In this Azure Dragon Palace, other than this canyon, is there no other place of value?" However, Zhuowen frowned slightly. All along the way, all he saw were ruins and potholes. Besides this gorge, he didn't discover anything else. Could it be that this Azure Dragon Hall is empty? After searching around, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hint of disappointment. He originally thought that there would be some good things in the Azure Dragon Hall. However, other than the corpses of more than 30 Emperor-level experts in the Crescent Canyon, there was nothing else. After returning to the canyon, Zhuowen discovered that Xiao He was still focused on studying the corpses of the experts in the canyon. He asked Xiao He, "Did you find anything?" Shaking her head, Xiao He sighed softly. "I didn't discover much, but I did some research just now. Before these martial emperors died, they all welcomed death without any signs of resistance. Die generously? Are you saying that these emperor-level powerhouses committed suicide?" Zhuowen's pupils constricted. Xiao He shook her head and said, "It's not suicide. It should be because they encountered an enemy that was much stronger than them, and they believed that they would die without a doubt. So they simply stopped resisting and went to their deaths." "Oh, an enemy that was much stronger than them? Could it be that the saints are dealing with them?" Zhuowen asked doubtfully. "It should be a saint. Furthermore, I suspect that it is very likely that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace killed these Emperor-level experts." Xiao He analyzed in an orderly manner. Nodding his head, Zhuowen agreed with Xiao He's words. The master of the Azure Dragon Palace was a powerful saint, and these Emperor-level experts looked like invaders. It made sense for the master of the Azure Dragon Palace to kill these Emperor-level experts. Then what about the master of the Azure Dragon Palace? Staring at the experts in the canyon, Zhuowen was extremely interested in the master of the Azure Dragon Palace. He did not believe that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace would not leave anything behind in such a large space. Kid, look. Before these Emperor-level experts died, they all raised their heads and looked in one direction. Could it be that there's something special about the direction they're looking in? Xiao He's sudden voice caused Zhuowen's eyes to light up. It was indeed as Xiao He had said. These Emperor-level experts were all looking in one direction, and more than 30 of them were looking in the same direction. "Let's go. Let's enter the canyon and look in the direction of these experts. Perhaps we'll be able to find something different." With that, Zhuowen leaped into the canyon and stood beside one of the experts. He imitated the latter and looked up at the sky. Xiao He stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and also looked up at the sky. "That's a star." Very quickly, Zhuowen noticed that at the end of the direction they were looking, a brilliant white star appeared in their eyes. This white star was extremely inconspicuous because in front of it was a countless meteor shower. The white star was easily covered by the countless meteor shower. In the direction of the canyon, and with these experts looking up, they could barely see the existence of the white star. "Xiao He, could that white star be an important place in this space?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. Xiaohei lowered her head and muttered to herself for a moment before saying, "There should be a reason why so many Emperor-level experts are looking up at that white star at the same time. That white star must be extraordinary. Let's go up and take a look." Hearing this, Zhuowen followed Xiaohei's instructions, and 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out of his back. He turned into a terrifying bolt of lightning and suddenly shot upwards at an extremely high speed. The white star was extremely far away from the ground. Zhuowen had been flying for a full 2 hours, but he actually discovered that the distance between him and the white star had not changed at all. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He stomped his foot, and his speed increased by a large margin. His entire body turned into a swift bolt of lightning as he cut through the void. 4 hours later, Zhuowen arrived at the meteor belt in the sky. This meteor belt was formed by countless meteors that had fallen from the sky. As they cut through the void, due to the friction, they produced an extremely dazzling light. It could be said that the meteor belt was filled with burning meteors. Furthermore, the temperature was extremely terrifying. If Zhuowen were to be hit directly, he would not be able to withstand it. "Kid, be careful. This meteor belt is not a friendly place," Xiaohei cautioned cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He stomped his foot lightly, and his speed decreased significantly. At the same time, he used his perception to constantly observe the movements of the surrounding meteors. In this meteor belt, Zhuowen did not dare to explode with his full speed. After all, there were simply too many meteors. If he were to go too fast, it would be difficult to control when the time came. It would be very easy for him to be hit. At that time, he would really be unlucky. As he slowly advanced, Zhuowen constantly paid attention to the movements in his surroundings. For a moment, he was scared but not in danger. Although the surrounding meteors were very dense, Zhuowen was extremely cautious and managed to avoid them one by one. "Be careful. There is a meteor on your left that is rushing towards you at high speed." Suddenly, Xiaohei's solemn voice rang out, startling Zhuowen. He turned his head to look. Indeed, on his left, there was a meteor that was dozens of feet in size. It carried a blazing heat and was rushing towards him at an extremely fast speed. "Damn it! Hurry up and get out of here." Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. He stomped his foot in an attempt to dodge the meteor that was rushing towards him at high speed. Unfortunately, his speed was still slower than the meteor by a beat. Bang! The huge meteor directly hit Zhuowen's leg, causing him to lose his balance and fall downwards. "Kid, steady yourself. There are more meteors below. If you don't steady yourself, your situation will become extremely bad," Xiaohei shouted sternly. At this moment, Zhuowen was also very calm. Golden light flashed as he transformed into 4 heads and 8 arms. The smaller meteors that were rushing towards him were all shattered by his hands. After falling for nearly 100 meters, Zhuowen finally stabilized himself. His breathing was slightly hurried. This meteor belt was indeed not a good place. The huge meteor just now was too terrifying. Even if Zhuowen used the nirvana of the great sun, he would not dare to face it head-on. "Be careful this time," Xiaohei reminded him. Nodding his head, Zhuowen stomped his foot and once again rushed towards the depths of the meteor belt. His speed was much slower than before, and he was even more cautious than before. 4 hours later, Zhuowen suddenly jumped out of the meteor belt and arrived in the sky opposite the meteor belt. "I'm finally out. The white star is not far away from us." Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief. His gaze converged on the white star in the sky. At this moment, the white star was much larger than before. Zhuowen knew that he was not far away from the white star. "Let's go. Let's see the true appearance of the white star." Xiaohei's face was also filled with curiosity as she hurriedly said, "Whoosh!" With that, Zhuowen once again transformed into a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the white star that was getting closer and closer. His speed was much faster than before. An hour later, a bolt of lightning streaked across the void and stopped 1,000 meters away from the white star, revealing a tall and straight figure. "This is..." Looking at the white star that was 1,000 meters away, Zhuowen could not help but be stunned. His mouth was slightly agape. The scene in front of him was really shocking. The true appearance of the white star was a pale white dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long. The pale white dragon was strangely pale from head to toe. The pale dragon's huge body was curled up, as if it was protecting something. Through the pale dragon's body, Zhuowen saw that at the center of the huge dragon was an equally huge hall. Above the hall were 3 bold and powerful words: Azure Dragon Hall. The hall that was protected by the huge dragon in front of him was the real Azure Dragon Hall. So this is the real Azure Dragon Hall. This pale dragon should be formed from the origin of the Azure Dragon. It should be the work of the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. Xiao He said with a cautious gaze. The origin of the Azure Dragon? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Xiao He glanced at Zhuowen and explained. The owner of this true dragon's corpse is the Azure Dragon. I've already told you. Although the Azure Dragon has been dead for a long time, there will still be a trace of its origin in its corpse. The master of the Azure Dragon Hall is very lucky. When he found the Azure Dragon's corpse, it shouldn't have been dead for long. That's why he was able to extract a strand of origin energy from its corpse. The huge Azure Dragon around the Azure Dragon Hall is formed from the Azure Dragon's origin. It doesn't have any intelligence or consciousness, but it contains an extremely dense amount of origin energy. If you can enter the Azure Dragon Hall, I'm afraid you can use the Azure Dragon's origin to quickly raise your cultivation. At this point, Xiao He's eyes revealed a trace of emotion. It was obvious that he admired the methods of the Azure Dragon Hall. So it's not a true dragon, but a strand of the Azure Dragon's origin. Chapter 805. Songlong Taoist. I wonder what kind of treasures exist in the Songlong Hall? Zhuowen's gaze shifted slightly as he looked at the Songlong Hall above the Songlong Hall. His eyes were burning with passion. Xiao He nodded and muttered. The Songlong Hall is a saint's cave after all. The things inside are definitely not bad. It depends on whether you have the ability to obtain them. Let's go up and take a look. As he spoke, Xiao He took the lead and flew towards the Songlong Hall. Zhuowen followed behind him, not to be outdone, and instantly ascended to the top of the Songlong Hall. In front of the hall was an extremely huge square. In front of the square, there was a huge hollow door. The ground was shrouded in a misty white mist, as if an immortal had descended to this place. Stepping on the clouds under his feet, Zhuowen entered the square door and arrived at the square. At the end of the square, there was a hall that was as vast as a giant beast. It stood there quietly, unchanging since ancient times. In front of the hall, there was a stone tablet that was dozens of feet tall. On the surface of the stone tablet, the words Songlong Hall were engraved. Zhuowen knew that the vast hall in front of him was the real Songlong Hall. Rumble! Suddenly, the countless clouds and mist that lingered on the ground of the square suddenly started to roll. A strange force rushed out from the entire square, causing Zhuowen to involuntarily take a few steps back. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. What's going on? The clouds and mist in this square. Before he could finish speaking, countless clouds and mist rolled and gathered in the sky above the square to form a stalwart figure. The figure formed by the clouds and mist was the image of a middle-aged man. He wore a loose robe and had a feathered crown on his head. His eyes were bright like the moon and bright like the stars. Countless dragon shadows swept out and circled around this imposing figure. It was an extremely magnificent and terrifying sight. I am the Songlong Taoist. The Songlong Hall was built by me, and you are the first person to enter the Songlong Hall in tens of thousands of years. The stalwart man slowly bent down. His eyes flickered with a bright light, as if they contained the evolution of countless centuries, and were filled with vicissitudes. Songlong Taoist? The master of the Songlong Hall? Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils constricted as he stared fixedly at the stalwart man. He could feel the terror of the Songlong Taoist in front of him. Are you still alive? What happened in the space of the Songlong Hall? Zhuowen suddenly asked anxiously. However, Taoist Songlong Taoist, Taoist. Only Taoist glanced indifferently at Zhuowen, before he raised his head once again, as if he was recalling something. Brat! This should be the phantom left behind by Taoist Master Songlong back then. It's impossible for him to know what you're talking about. Don't waste your time. Blackie stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and said indifferently, Taoist. Taoist, Taoist, long Taoist, 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 long Taoist. Xiao He sneered and said, "You have never experienced how terrifying the catastrophe was back then. Let me tell you, the ancient era was the most prosperous era of martial arts in the heavenly armor continent. At that time, emperor-level and saint-level experts were extremely common, unlike now where even saint-level experts are pitifully rare. In that era, there was even a sage grand ceremony. Tens of thousands of saint-level experts invited a Tao discussion conference. That was a glorious era, where geniuses came forth in large numbers, and experts were as common as clouds." Speaking of this, Xiao He's face revealed a trace of emotion. Clearly, he had also recalled some past events from the ancient era. Sage Grand Ceremony? The more Zhuowen listened, the more surprised he became. Tens of thousands of saint-level experts had participated in the grand ceremony. Countless saint-level experts had discussed and comprehended the Tao. Thinking of such a scene, Zhuowen could not help but feel a little shocked and excited. In Zhuowen's current era, it was hard to even see a saint-level expert. As expected, it could not be compared to the ancient era at all. These things are still too far away for you, and you won't be able to come into contact with such things. Now let's see what Taoist Master Songlong has to say. Xiao He shook his head and did not continue speaking. Instead, he signaled Zhuowen to pay attention to Taoist Master Songlong's movements. The Azure Dragon Hall contains a universe within, forming a world of its own. Many wonders are in the hall. There are a total of 3 worlds in the hall. If you pass through each world, you will receive a corresponding reward. Moreover, each of these 3 worlds is more dangerous than the last. If you are not careful, your life will be in danger. If you are a coward who is afraid of death, then there is no need to enter the Azure Dragon Hall. As he spoke, Taoist Master Songlong looked down at Zhuowen and asked indifferently, "Are you willing to pass through the Azure Dragon Hall? Kid, you have to think carefully." Taoist Master Songlong is a saint-level expert. The Azure Dragon Hall that he set up is also filled with danger. It's best to think carefully before making a decision. Xiao He's gaze also converged on Zhuowen. He was also waiting for Zhuowen's answer. Zhuowen laughed and said in a clear voice, "Charge. Why not? There is no free lunch in this world. Since I want to obtain benefits, then I have to bet my life. If I don't even dare to bet my life, then how can I become a powerhouse?" As he spoke, Zhuowen suddenly stomped his foot and directly stepped through the door of the Azure Dragon Hall in front of him. Buzz! The moment Zhuowen stepped into the Azure Dragon Hall, an invisible wave was produced and instantly enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. Then Zhuowen discovered that his vision went black. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he discovered that he was standing on the peak of a towering mountain. A wild wind swept over, blowing Zhuowen's disheveled hair. On the peak of the mountain, Zhuowen looked down and discovered that there was a vast and boundless land below. On the land, there were countless living beings. At the same time, cities were like countless black dots that covered every corner of the land. Suddenly, a golden light flashed. On a huge rock beside Zhuowen, lines of golden words appeared. "This is a layer of heaven and earth. This heaven and earth is ruled by Shengzhen. There are countless demons hidden in this abyss of heaven and earth. These demons are very strong and have an undying body. Killing them is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The only way is to comprehend the power of heaven and earth within 3 years. Only the power of heaven and earth is the nemesis of demons. 3 years later, demons will descend upon this world, and all living beings will be wiped out. You are no exception. Head to Shengzhen and enter the Shengzhen Wall of Enlightenment. Comprehend the Tao for 3 years. If you comprehend the power of heaven and earth, you will live. If you don't comprehend it, you will die." Looking at the golden words on the wall, Zhuowen's pupil shrank. According to the words of the Songlong Taoist, wouldn't he have to stay in this world for 3 years? That was too long. Now, Zhuowen was most worried about his family and friends in the outside world. Not only Lu Hantian, but also the Zhuo family. After all, his identity as a Ryuka descendant had been exposed. It would not be difficult to find out about the Zhuo family behind him. 3 years is too long. Can it be faster? Zhuowen suddenly shouted to the sky. The flow of time in the Zonglong Hall is 365 times faster than the outside world. A day in the outside world is a year in the Zonglong Hall. A vigorous voice sounded in his mind at a steady pace. A year here is only a day in the outside world. This Zonglong Taoist is so powerful that he can actually change the laws of time of heaven and earth? Xiao Hei's eyes flickered, revealing a look of shock. Zhuowen, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. If what the Zonglong Taoist said was true, then he had a lot of time. After all, a year in this world was only a day in the outside world. Xiao Hei, what is the power of heaven and earth? Zhuowen suddenly asked with a frown. Zhuowen was indeed not familiar with the power of heaven and earth that the Zonglong Taoist had mentioned. He could only consult Xiao Hei. Above the concept is the power of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth is a mysterious power that is even stronger than the power of concept. The essence of the power of concept is actually to use the mysterious power to magnify one's potential by thousands of times, causing one's strength to increase to an extremely exaggerated level in a short period of time. However, the power of heaven and earth is different. The concept is to stimulate one's potential, but the power of heaven and earth is to stimulate the power of heaven and earth. Relying on the mysterious power, the power of heaven and earth is added to one's body for one's own use. When Xiao Hei said until here, he saw that Zhuowen was still somewhat puzzled. He shook his head and said, there is a limit to a person's strength. The power of concept that you can use is limited. However, the power of heaven and earth is released by heaven and earth. The stronger heaven and earth is, the stronger the power that you can borrow will be. Hearing this, a look of understanding appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. In layman's terms, the power of concept was actually to use one's body as a container to allow this container to carry more power. Then one had to continuously increase the capacity of the container. However, there was ultimately a limit to this. On the other hand, the power of heaven and earth was to use heaven and earth as a container. If one wanted to become stronger, one only needed to borrow the power of heaven and earth. There was an essential difference between the two. Comprehending the power of heaven and earth is much more difficult than comprehending the concept. Although your talent is indeed strong, it is not very likely that you can comprehend such a mysterious power in a short 3 years. Xiao Hei shook his head and said in a rather pessimistic tone. Shrugging his shoulders, Zhuowen said, didn't Taoist Zonglong just mention that there is an enlightenment rock wall in Shenzhen, the ruler of this heaven and earth? Perhaps that enlightenment rock wall will be of great benefit to my comprehension? Yes, Taoist Zonglong emphasized the enlightenment rock wall in Shenzhen. I'm afraid that thing will be of great help to your comprehension. Now let's go to Shenzhen first. Xiao Hei nodded in agreement. Then he stood on Zhuowen's shoulder. Following the latter, he turned into a gust of wind and swept towards the huge land below the mountain peak. At the center of this heaven and earth, there was an extremely huge mountain range. This mountain range stretched for tens of thousands of miles. At a glance, it looked like a huge crouching dragon. Above this mountain range, thick clouds and mist lingered all year round, covering the landscape of the mountain range. This mountain range was called the Holy Vein by the creatures of this heaven and earth. Above the Holy Vein, there was a huge sect called Shenzhen. It was the true ruler of this heaven and earth, and was revered and worshipped by countless people. A figure suddenly swept over and entered the clouds and mist above the Holy Vein. After 2 hours, the figure reappeared with a frown on his face. There are quite powerful restrictions around this Holy Vein. We can't find the specific location of Shenzhen at all. Chapter 806. Nalan Hongyu, Shenzhen is not simple. If you barge in like this, it is unlikely that you will be able to barge in. There are quite a few people gathered at the foot of the mountain. Perhaps there is a grand event in Shenzhen. When the time comes, you just have to sneak in. Xiao Hei's eyes darted around, and immediately noticed that there were quite a few people gathered at the foot of Shenzhen. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded his head. With a stomp of his foot, he landed in an extremely remote corner. Then, he walked out of the corner, and immediately discovered that there was a sea of people at the foot of Shenzhen. It was quite a spectacular sight. The foot of Shenzhen is so lively. Looking at the sea of people at the foot of the mountain, Zhuowen could not help but reveal a look of astonishment. It seemed that it was just as Xiao He had said. There was indeed a grand event in Shenzhen today. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that the crowd at the foot of the mountain were basically elders bringing along some young boys and girls. Those young boys and girls all had looks of anticipation in their eyes. Zhuowen silently stood in the crowd. Relying on his sharp senses, he could hear all the discussions around him. And he finally knew why Shenzhen was so lively today. It turned out that today was Shenzhen's triennial mountain opening ceremony. And this so-called mountain opening ceremony was to open Shenzhen's mountain gate and begin to recruit geniuses from the countless surrounding cities, thus replenishing Shenzhen with new blood. For this reason, the elders of countless surrounding cities all brought their own juniors and rushed to Shenzhen's mountain gate from thousands of miles away in order to participate in this mountain opening ceremony. They hoped that their juniors would be chosen by Shenzhen and become a member of Shenzhen. So it's to recruit disciples. Hearing the discussions around him, Zhuowen's eyes flashed and he muttered to himself in a low voice, "Anyway, my goal is to enter Shenzhen. I might as well participate in this mountain opening ceremony." The restrictions around Shenzhen were very strong. Even Xiao He could not break through them. Therefore, if he wanted to enter Shenzhen, he still had to rely on the internal members of Shenzhen to lead him. Once he entered Shenzhen, with Zhuowen's strength, where could he not go? It would not be difficult to find the Enlightenment Cliff. Thinking of this, Zhuowen calmly stood in the crowd, appearing extremely inconspicuous as he silently waited for the opening ceremony to begin. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that the cultivators gathered at the foot of the mountain were generally not very strong. The strongest among them was around the level of a 5-wheel ultimate emperor. There was no one who had surpassed the level of a 4-wheel ultimate emperor. It was very obvious that the cultivators in this layer of heaven were generally weak. However, Zhuowen knew that there were definitely 4-wheel ultimate emperors in Shenzhen. After all, this was the ruler of this world. It was impossible for such an expert to not exist. Thump thump thump. Suddenly, the crisp sound of horse hooves rang out from the end of the road on the other side of the mountain gate. It caused the entire area to shake. The sound of horse hooves immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. They all looked towards the end of the road. At the end of the road, a group of armored cavalry was rapidly approaching. There were more than a dozen people in this cavalry group. Standing at the very front of the group was a valiant and heroic figure. She was leading the way. This figure was a young woman in her prime. She was dressed in red armor, with 5 red flags on the back of her armor. She sat on a tall horse, and the flags fluttered in the wind. She looked quite carefree. Are they from Saint Light City? The woman in the lead is the daughter of the Saint Light City Lord, Nalin Hongyu. Saint Light City is the most powerful faction among the countless cities. The Saint Light City Lord Nalin Shang is known as the #1 city lord. It's best if we don't provoke them. Nalin Hongyu is quite petty. It's best if we don't provoke her. It won't be a good thing if she remembers us. Many people's expressions changed slightly when they saw the large group of cavalry rushing over. They discussed animatedly and opened up a path for them. Hearing the discussions of the surrounding people, Zhuowen also knew that the group of cavalry rushing over had a powerful background. Otherwise, it would be impossible for everyone to be so wary of them. Humph! What's so great about Saint Light City? If Nalin Shang hadn't encountered a fortuitous encounter back then, how could he have become the #1 city lord? If I can obtain Nalin Shang's fortuitous encounter, my achievements will only be better and stronger than his. A somewhat sour voice sounded from beside Zhuowen. On Zhuowen's left, a middle-aged man with a face as black as charcoal raised his head slightly. There was a trace of disdain in his eyes. He was actually extremely disdainful of Saint Light City. Master, you are right. The Saint Light City Lord really can't compare to you. Your talent completely surpasses Nalin Shang's. All you lack is a fortuitous encounter. A young man and a young woman followed beside the middle-aged man. They should be his disciples. At this moment, the young man and woman hurriedly flattered the black-faced man. The middle-aged man enjoyed the flattery of his disciples. He raised his chin and chuckled. Of course. If I also have a fortuitous encounter, my achievements will definitely surpass Nailan Shang's. Zhuowen inwardly shook his head when he heard this. This middle-aged man thought too highly of himself. He was already so old, but he was only a third-wheel ultimate emperor. Even if he had a fortuitous encounter, his achievements wouldn't be much better. Zhuowen naturally wouldn't say such words. He only watched indifferently as the middle-aged man blew his own trumpet. Oh, do you mean that if you also have a fortuitous encounter, you can replace my father's position as the #1 city lord? Suddenly, an indifferent voice was slowly transmitted over from a short distance away. Nailan Hongyu's group had unknowingly arrived at a spot not far from the black-faced man. And the black-faced man's words were naturally heard by Nailan Hongyu. The black-faced man's expression froze when he heard this. He turned his head and happened to see Nailan Hongyu coldly staring at him. His entire body involuntarily trembled. So it's Miss Nailan. I was just spouting nonsense. Don't take it seriously. The black-faced man hurriedly explained. When Nailan Hongyu appeared, the young man and young woman standing beside the black-faced man kept their heads lowered, not daring to look at her face. Unfortunately, I already took it seriously. Nailan Hongyu's beautiful face was filled with coldness and ruthlessness. She said to the soldiers behind her, "These 3 people insulted our Saint Light City. They deserve to die." Yes, yes. More than 10 heavily armored soldiers responded in unison. Then, they dismounted from their horses and charged at the black-faced man with long spears in their hands. The black-faced man hadn't expected Nailan Hongyu to be so unruly and unscrupulous. He immediately roared angrily and charged forward, wanting to escape the encirclement. Puchi, a long spear swept past and instantly pierced through the black-faced man's chest. His strength wasn't bad, as he was a third-wheel ultimate emperor. Unfortunately, the soldiers behind Nailan Hongyu weren't weak either. They were also third-wheel ultimate emperors. Moreover, there were more than 10 of them working together. The black-faced man was no match for them at all. The 2 disciples beside the black-faced man couldn't escape the fate of being killed either. In just an instant, 3 corpses appeared on the field. Many people in the surroundings gasped when they saw the 3 people killed in an instant. Their eyes were filled with fear and dread as they looked at Nailan Hongyu. They had long heard that Nailan Hongyu was crafty and unreasonable. Now, it seemed that the rumors weren't false. She had directly taken the lives of the black-faced man, just because of a few words. She was indeed too domineering. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He was also rather displeased with Nailan Hongyu's actions. However, the black-faced man could only blame himself for being too talkative. He clearly knew that Nailan Hongyu couldn't be provoked, but he still insisted on using the Saint Light City's city lord as an example. If he wasn't courting death, then what was? And the 6 of you? Just now, this person was slandering our Saint Light City, but the 6 of you didn't say anything to stop him. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. Cripple the 6 of them. After killing the black-faced man, and the other 2, Nailan Hongyu didn't seem to have vented her anger. Her cold eyes immediately stared at the 6 people standing beside the black-faced man. Surprisingly, Zhuowen was among these 6 people. After all, Zhuowen was standing beside the black-faced man. At this moment, Nailan Hongyu had treated him as a target to take care of. Hearing these words, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. Nailan Hongyu had gone too far. It was fine that she had killed the black-faced man, but the 6 of them had nothing to do with the black-faced man at all. Could it be that just because the black-faced man had slandered Saint Light City, and they didn't say anything to refute him, she wanted to cripple their cultivation? This method of harming innocent bystanders was too overbearing. Miss Nailan, this has nothing to do with us. The black-faced man was the one who slandered Saint Light City. It has nothing to do with us at all. Among the 6 people who had been found out, one of them was rather fat. At this moment, he was somewhat unconvinced as he stood up and spoke. Crack! A shadow suddenly flashed out. The fat man hadn't even finished speaking when the shadow had already heavily smashed into his chest. Soon after, it pierced through. It was actually a long spear that glowed with cold light. You! The fat man's face was filled with disbelief. He hadn't even finished speaking when he had actually suffered a fatal disaster. This was something he had never expected. Did I allow you to speak? Nalan Hongyu coldly glanced at the fat man. Then her gaze landed on the other 5 people. She said indifferently, I think all of you should be more aware. Cripple your own cultivation, so that my people don't have to do anything. As soon as these words were spoken, besides Zhuowen, the expressions of the other 4 people became extremely unsightly. Nalan Hongyu actually wanted them to cripple their own cultivation. This was a huge humiliation. I'll count to 3. If you still don't cripple your own cultivation, then your fate will be the same as that person from before. As she spoke, Nalan Hongyu pointed at the already dead fat man. 1, 2, 3. When Nalan Hongyu counted to 3, 4 of them shouted loudly as their hands suddenly smashed onto their lower abdomens. Instantly, their dantians were shattered, and they became complete cripples from then on. The 4 of them let out a shrill cry as they held onto their abdomens and fell to the ground. They screamed hysterically and rolled about. Their appearance was extremely miserable. Nalan Hongyu nodded with satisfaction, and then her gaze finally descended onto the last young man. Her shapely brows raised as she said, Why haven't you crippled your own cultivation? Could it be that you want to die? As soon as these words were spoken, the gazes of the surrounding people converged onto the young man. Their hearts were filled with curiosity, curious about the young man's current actions. Do you think you have the qualifications? Chapter 807. Mountain Opening Ceremony. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes narrowed, and her gaze became even more gloomy. The young man in front of her was really reckless. He actually dared to speak to her in such a manner. Do you dare to repeat what you just said? Nalan Hongyu said coldly. At this moment, the surrounding crowd's gazes were gathered on Zhuowen. They really wanted to know how the young man would respond to Nalan Hongyu's question. Utterly boring. Zhuowen shook his head and ignored Nalan Hongyu. In his opinion, this was just a small quarrel, and he naturally would not take it to heart. How dare you ignore me? Fine. Today I will let you know the consequences of offending me. Go cripple this person's limbs. I want him to kneel and beg for mercy. Zhuowen's disregard made Nalan Hongyu extremely angry. She pointed her jade-like finger at the soldier beside her and coldly said, Yes. The soldier nodded. He grasped the long spear in his hand and took a step forward. His entire body was like a swimming dragon as he charged directly towards Zhuowen. His speed soared to the extreme. Brat, you can only blame yourself for being blind and offending Miss Nalan. You better reflect on yourself when you go to hell. In an instant, the soldier arrived in front of Zhuowen. He moved his spear and stabbed towards Zhuowen's chest. However, Zhuowen was dumbfounded as he stood there without moving. This brat is courting death. He is actually not dodging. I'm afraid he is really scared silly. Since he doesn't have any strength, he shouldn't cause trouble. After all, trouble comes from the mouth. Many people secretly shook their heads and sighed when they saw Zhuowen's stunned appearance. They all believed that the young man in front of them was undoubtedly going to die. The smile on Nalan Hongyu's lips grew wider, and her beautiful eyes were filled with arrogance. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and coldly stared at the stunned young man. You are just a piece of trash with a glib tongue. Serves you right if you die. Ding! The sound of metal clashing resounded, following which, the soldier's right hand pressed against the end of the long spear. His entire body was like a statue, and he was actually unable to move an inch forward. Many people immediately saw the soldier's strange behavior, and it caused the confusion in their eyes to become even more intense. They were secretly guessing what the soldier was doing. What are you doing? Just kill him. Nalan Hongyu also saw the soldier's strange behavior and coldly snorted. Her beautiful face was full of displeasure. On the other hand, the soldier couldn't say anything. When the spear pierced Zhuowen's chest, he thought he had succeeded, but the next scene left him dumbfounded. This was because when his spear was pressed against Zhuowen's chest, it was as if it was pressed against a hard rock. It was unable to move even an inch. In other words, this young man's body was much harder than his spear. Even if I stand here and let him kill me, he won't be able to. What's the point of keeping such a piece of trash? Zhuowen finally opened his mouth. With a stomp of his foot, A terrifying strength chi burst out, causing the spear in his chest to crumble inch by inch, turning into countless fragments. Then, he clenched his right hand into a fist and fiercely punched the soldier's chest. Poochie! A mouthful of blood spurted out, and like a butterfly with its wings broken, the soldier flew backwards and crashed heavily onto the ground more than 10 meters away. After struggling for a while, he became completely motionless. What? He killed an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator with a single punch? How can this kid be so terrifying? Everyone's gazes converged on the motionless soldier nearby. Everyone knew that this soldier was probably already dead. However, this was an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator after all. Killing him with a single punch was a little too terrifying, wasn't it? The smile on Nalan Hongyu's face froze. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuowen as she said coldly, "You dare kill someone from my Light Saint City? He wants to kill me. Do you think I can't kill him?" Zhuowen sneered. Nalan Hongyu's face was gloomy as she said coldly, "Attack together. I want this kid to stay here forever." As soon as these words came out, more than a dozen armored soldiers around Nalan Hongyu turned into afterimages and rushed toward Zhuowen, who was in the center. "Good timing," Zhuowen sneered. With a stomp of his foot, 3 pairs of lightning wings sprouted from his back. His entire body turned into an ethereal bolt of lightning. Everyone saw a bolt of lightning flash across the bodies of the 10 or so soldiers. Following which, the bodies of the 10 or so soldiers suddenly froze and were sent flying back, smashing into the ground tens of meters away. They struggled in pain and screamed incessantly. A bolt of lightning flashed past and appeared in the center of the clearing, revealing a tall and straight figure. "You'd better not provoke me again. Otherwise, you'll pay a much higher price next time." He glanced coldly at Nalan Hongyu, causing her to involuntarily take a few steps back. Zhuowen found a rather remote corner and silently waited for Shengzhen's mountain opening ceremony to begin. Right now, his goal was Shengzhen's Wall of Enlightenment, so he didn't want to cause trouble so soon. Hiss! Hiss! Everyone couldn't help but gasp when they saw the dozen or so soldiers that had been instantly sent flying. More than a dozen Ultimate Emperor Realm 3-wheeled soldiers had actually been defeated by this mysterious youth in a single exchange. Wasn't this speed too fast? Who exactly is this kid? Why have I never heard of him before? I've never heard of him either, but this kid is very strong. He'll definitely be able to enter Shengzhen during this mountain opening ceremony. That's right. This kid's cultivation is at least at the Ultimate Emperor Realm. Entering Shengzhen won't be a problem at all. The sounds of discussion were accompanied by an uproar. Everyone's eyes involuntarily glanced towards the corner where Zhuowen was, discussing the latter's background and identity. Zhuowen didn't care about the discussions around him. No matter how they guessed, Zhuowen couldn't possibly be a cultivator of this world. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes flickered. She didn't provoke Zhuowen again. The strength that Zhuowen had just displayed made her realize that this kid was much stronger than her and couldn't be easily provoked. However, Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes were filled with resentment. Zhuowen's actions had undoubtedly caused her to lose face in front of everyone. Late in the morning, the majestic gates of Shengzhen finally opened slowly under the expectant gazes of the crowd. A group of people swept out from within. In front of this group of people, there were 2 figures with particularly powerful auras. One of them was dressed in long black robes and had a cold expression. The other was an old man with a black mole between his eyebrows. Behind the 2 of them were 20 youths who weren't very old. These youths were surprisingly dressed the same way. They should be disciples of Shengzhen. Zhuowen raised his eyebrows when he saw the black-robed man and the old man with the black mole. These 2 people weren't weak. He could sense that the black-robed man was at the Ultimate Emperor Realm, while the old man was slightly weaker. He was at the Ultimate Emperor Realm. This kind of cultivation was indeed enough to completely suppress the crowd at the foot of the mountain. This was because the strongest person in the crowd was only at the Ultimate Emperor Realm. Haha. Today is the grand opening ceremony of Shengzhen. I would like to thank everyone for coming. The old man with the black mole said with a smile. Elderby, stop talking nonsense. Take out the testing stone tablets and test them, the black-robed man said coldly. The old man with the black mole called Elderby nodded and waved his sleeve. Instantly, 20 huge stone tablets descended from the sky. If one looked closely, the surface of these huge stone tablets was embedded with 10 precious pearls from bottom to top. They looked rather magnificent. These are the testing stone tablets. Everyone can see that there are 10 precious pearls embedded on the surface of the testing stone tablets. The testing stone tablet is testing the comprehensive result of your aptitude and strength. The more pearls you can light up, the better your result will be. After he finished speaking, the black-robed man said to the 20 disciples of Shenzhen behind him, "The 20 of you will each be responsible for one stone tablet. There will be no mistakes." "Yes." The 20 disciples of Shenzhen replied in unison. Then, they turned into 20 streaks of flowing light and arrived in front of their respective stone tablets. They were prepared to preside over the testing stone tablets. "Second uncle, do you still remember me?" As soon as the black-robed man finished speaking, a rather crisp voice rang out and attracted the attention of the black-robed man and the surrounding people. A beautiful figure suddenly arrived in front of the mountain gate and stood beside the black-robed man with a charming smile on her face. "Oh, Hongyu? Haha. I didn't expect that you would also come to participate in the opening ceremony." The black-robed man was stunned at first. Then his gaze converged on Nalan Hongyu, who was standing in front of him. A rare smile appeared on his cold face. "It was my father who asked me to come. I had no choice. He also said that I would have to rely on you to take care of me in Shenzhen this time." As she spoke, Nalan Hongyu hugged the black-robed man's arm in an extremely intimate manner. The black-robed man didn't avoid it and said indifferently, "Big brother is still so shrewd. I'm afraid he knows that I will be in this opening ceremony. So he asked you to come, right?" Nalan Hongyu stuck out her tongue and said, "Second uncle, nothing can escape your eyes. All right, since you have personally come to Shenzhen, I can't be a bad host, right? You don't have to take the test for the opening ceremony. When the time comes, I will directly ask for a position as an inner court disciple for you," the black-robed man said dotingly. As he spoke, the black-robed man's gaze landed on Elderby, who was standing nearby, and he said, "Elderby, this girl is my niece. I want to promote her to an inner court disciple. You won't have any objections, right?" Elderby frowned slightly. Nalan Hongyu wasn't young, and her cultivation was only at the ultimate emperor realm. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to become an inner court disciple. However, the black-robed man's status was higher than his, so he couldn't refuse. He could only tactfully say, "We can't decide on this matter. When the time comes, we will need to seek the approval of the Holy Lord." "I know. When the time comes, I will personally go to the Holy Lord." The black-robed man nodded. This scene was naturally witnessed by everyone below the mountain gate. Many people's eyes flickered with displeasure. The black-robed man was opening the back door for Nalan Hongyu in public. Wasn't he a little too arrogant and despotic? Chapter 808. Test and Contradiction. Let the test begin. Only those who can light up 6 pearls, or more will pass, and become Shenzhen's outer disciples. If you can light up 10 pearls, you will be promoted to an inner disciple. Elderby waved his sleeves. Immediately, the crowd split into 20 teams and went to their respective stone tablets in an orderly manner to take the test. Zhuowen was at the end of the line for the 3rd stone tablet. At this moment, the juniors in the line had excited and expectant looks in their eyes. They rubbed shoulders and were eager to give it a try. The youth in the first line could not wait to place his right palm on the stone tablet. However, to his disappointment, only 3 pearls lit up on the stone tablet. Light up 3 pearls failed. Next, the Shenzhen disciple beside the stone tablet said coldly with a cold expression. Feeling the gazes from the crowd, the youth was too ashamed to show his face. He left the stone tablet dejectedly. Lighting up an orb. You are not qualified. Next. Light up 4 pearls failed. Next. The team's test was carried out in an orderly manner. Unfortunately, none of the 20 or so people in front of them passed the test. This cruel result caused many of the juniors in the line to panic. This was because they realized that some of the stronger youths had been mercilessly eliminated. Their chances of passing had become extremely small. Light up 6 pearls passed. Congratulations, stand behind the stone tablet first. The Shenzhen disciple beside the stone tablet said in a much gentler voice. At this moment, 6 pearls lit up on the surface of the stone tablet. It was extremely dazzling in the eyes of the crowd. At this moment, the person who was taking the test was a young girl, wearing a green dress. Perhaps she felt the envious gazes from the crowd. The young girl lifted her chin high like a proud peacock and went behind the stone tablet. Time ticked by. Soon more than half of the team had completed the test. However, only 4 of them had passed. They were 2 men and 2 women. Among them, the highest was the one who managed to light up 7 orbs. The elimination rate of the stone tablet was so high that it was out of Zhuowen's expectations. There were at least 500 to 600 people in their team who had participated in the test. Now more than half of them had passed, but only 4 people had passed. In front of the mountain gate, the black-robed man and elder by stood side by side silently. Their gazes occasionally swept across the young boys and girls who were taking the test under the stone tablet. No one knew what they were thinking. Nalan Hongyu, who was standing beside the black-robed man, had been searching through the ranks with her beautiful eyes. Soon, she locked onto a figure at the end of the 3rd group, and a bitter smile appeared on her face. And the figure that Nalan Hongyu had locked onto was none other than Zhuowen, who was leisurely waiting for the test. Within the group, Zhuowen naturally felt Nalan Hongyu's bitter gaze. However, he sneered in his heart. Originally, Zhuowen didn't care about Nalan Hongyu at all. After all, she was only an ultimate emperor stage cultivator. In Zhuowen's eyes, she was no different from an ant. Therefore, he didn't want to bother with her. But now, Nalan Hongyu's gaze made Zhuowen realize that she wouldn't let him off so easily. You'd better not provoke me. Otherwise, you'll regret it in the end. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He no longer paid attention to Nalan Hongyu. Nalan Hongyu was just a small fry. She didn't have the qualifications to be remembered by him. Zhuowen, you've lit up 5 orbs. You're not qualified. Next. The cold voice of a Shenzhen disciple rang out once again. The youth in front of Zhuowen had a vexed expression on his face. He was only 1 orb away from passing. Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived in front of the testing stone tablet. He gently placed his right hand on the surface of the tablet. Immediately, he felt a strange energy spread out from the tablet and circulate through his meridians. Zhuowen's appearance attracted the attention of many people. After all, the strength that Zhuowen had displayed in his clash with Nalan Hongyu wasn't weak. Many people believed that this mysterious youth had the strength to enter Shenzhen. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes focused on Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes flickered and revealed a trace of resentment. CICICI. Instantly, the orbs on the surface of the tablet where Zhuowen was standing lit up one by one. In an instant, more than 6 orbs had been lit up. Moreover, the number of orbs was still rising rapidly. In an instant, 10 orbs on the surface of the tablet lit up at the same time. It was as if 10 scorching suns were releasing light and heat at the same time. It's actually 10 orbs. This kid has actually activated 10 orbs. The surroundings suddenly became silent. After the silence, there was an uproar. It was like a monstrous tsunami that resounded through the crowd. The lazy expression of the Glory Sect disciple, who was in charge of the 3rd stone tablet, turned serious instantly. His gaze was fixed on the surface of the stone tablet. The 10 glowing pearls on the surface of the stone tablet froze on the spot. On the mountain gate, the black-robed man and old Bai, who were originally indifferent, also fixed their eyes on the 3rd tablet. As the hosts this time around, they naturally knew very well how difficult it was to trigger the 10 treasured pearls on the testing steel. Thus, they did not have any hope that someone would be able to trigger the 10 treasured pearls. The probability of that happening was simply too low. But now this scene had really happened in front of them. Nalan Hongyu was also stunned on the spot. The resentment in her beautiful eyes became more intense. She whispered a few words to the black-robed man beside her. The black-robed man frowned, and his eyes flickered. My result should be considered as a pass, right? Looking at the stunned Shenzhen disciple beside the tablet, Zhuowen had to remind him. The latter coughed a few times awkwardly and said with a smile, "Junior brother's talent is rare. You can actually activate 10 orbs. According to the rules, junior brother can directly become an inner disciple of Shenzhen." The enthusiastic attitude of the Shenzhen disciple was naturally seen by many people. However, there was no jealousy in their eyes. Instead, they were full of envy. This was because Zhuowen's result was too abnormal. It was out of everyone's reach. It was enough to break everyone's jealousy. Nodding his head, Zhuowen was not surprised at all. With his current strength, if he still couldn't activate the testing stone tablet, then his previous cultivation would have been in vain. Wait! Just as Zhuowen was about to lift his foot and walk behind the stone tablet, an untimely voice sounded, causing Zhuowen's foot to stop in midair. Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen stared at the black-robed man on the mountain gate and said indifferently, "What's the matter? It is said that you deliberately caused trouble in front of Shenzhen's mountain gate and injured many people. Is this true?" The black-robed man looked down at Zhuowen and said indifferently. Zhuowen's eyes looked past the black-robed man and landed on Naylan Hongyu, whose face was full of resentment. He knew that the black-robed man's sudden call was probably related to Naylan Hongyu. At this moment, many people's eyes were focused on them, especially when they saw the black-robed man questioning Zhuowen. Everyone's eyes were full of interest. Just now, many people present were aware of the conflict between Zhuowen and Naylan Hongyu. And this black-robed man was Naylan Hongyu's second uncle. They were afraid that this young man was going to be unlucky. "It was that group of people who provoked me first. Am I not allowed to defend myself?" Zhuowen replied indifferently. The black-robed man shook his head and said, "Shenzhen is the holy land of martial arts. How can we allow you to act like a madman and cause trouble here? Shenzhen will not accept a disciple with such a bad character like you. Now get out of here." As soon as these words were spoken, many people around were stunned. The young man in front of them was a genius who had lit up 10 pearls on the testing stone tablet. The black-robed man actually planned to drive such a genius out? Old Bai could not sit still and said to the black-robed man, "Brother Naylan, this child has lit up 10 pearls. It is a rare occurrence in 100 years. How can you act on your own initiative and drive him out of Shenzhen?" Old Bai, so what if this child is talented? His character is too bad. Our Shenzhen has spent so much effort to cultivate such a genius. I am afraid that we may not be able to get a reward in the future. It is not worth it to raise such an ingrate. The black-robed man shook his head and said that Zhuowen's character was not good. He had made up his mind to drive Zhuowen out. The smile on Naylan Hongyu's face became more and more intense. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen with a sense of victory. It was as if she was telling Zhuowen that offending her would not end well. Zhuowen was too lazy to pay attention to this unruly, willful, and ignorant woman. Instead, he looked at the black-robed man, took a step forward, and said indifferently, "Are you sure you want to drive me out? Then I can tell you clearly that the one who has a conflict with me is this bitch beside you. If you want to drive me out, then drive this bitch out as well." The smile on Naylan Hongyu's face instantly froze. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuowen as she said coldly, "What did you just say about me? I dare you to say it again." "I was only speaking the truth when I said you were a bitch," Zhuowen said indifferently. Naylan Hongyu almost went crazy when she heard this. Unfortunately, she didn't dare to go down and teach the young man a lesson, because the strength he displayed just now was at least at the ultimate emperor realm. She was no match for him at all. "You actually dared to insult a disciple of our Shenzhen's inner court in front of the Shenzhen mountain gate. You have really gone against the heavens. Men, capture this rebellious kid. If he resists, kill him on the spot." The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. His expression had become unsightly when he heard Zhuowen call Naylan Hongyu a bitch. Whoosh! 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 As soon as the black-robed man spoke, the Shenzhen disciples who were originally in charge of the stone tablet leaped up and surrounded Zhuowen. The tips of their swords were pointed at Zhuowen. Elder Bai frowned slightly and said, "Brother Naylan, there's no need to mobilize so many people. This kid did not do it on purpose. Let him go." Unfortunately, the black-robed man completely ignored Elder Bai. The black-robed man was much stronger than Elder Bai, and his status in the Shenzhen was much higher than Elder Bai's. So these Shenzhen disciples basically listened to the black-robed man. Chapter 809. One move. Nailan Hongyu hasn't become an inner disciple of Shenzhen yet, right? Could it be that I'm insulting all of you Shenzhen disciples? Zhuowen said indifferently, as he looked at the Shenzhen disciples surrounding him. Nailan Hongyu raised her chin high as the corners of her mouth curled up. She sneered, I'll definitely become an inner disciple. Insulting me now is the same as provoking Shenzhen. Don't you think you deserve to die? Hongyu is right. It's only a matter of time before she becomes an inner disciple. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to insult her? The black-robed man said coldly. Everyone looked at the young man surrounded by Shenzhen disciples. They shook their heads and sighed. They never thought that something like this would happen during the opening ceremony. This young man is really unlucky. With his talent, he could definitely become an inner disciple of Shenzhen. Unfortunately, everyone knew that the young man with peerless talent had offended Nailan Hongyu. Furthermore, Nailan Hongyu had a close relationship with the black-robed man. His chances of entering Shenzhen were completely ruined, and he might even have to pay the price of death. Do you regret it? There are some people that you can't afford to offend. However, it's useless for you to regret it now. Your talent is indeed not bad. Unfortunately, Shenzhen doesn't lack geniuses like you. Nailan Hongyu looked down at the young man from above. She assumed the posture of a victor. She wanted to see the young man in front of her reveal regret, anger, and other negative emotions. Unfortunately, the young man who was surrounded was extremely calm. His pair of indifferent eyes were like an unchanging stone statue. There wasn't the slightest hint of emotion in them. Putting on an act, huh? Second uncle, take down this rebellious fellow. Nailan Hongyu snorted coldly and said to the black-robed man beside her. The black-robed man nodded and waved his hand. Take down this child. If he dares to resist, kill him immediately. Yes. The 20 Shenzhen disciples shouted in unison. They clenched their right hands, and sharp swords appeared in their hands. Then, they rushed toward Zhuowen with great tacit understanding. Looking around indifferently at the incoming glory sect disciples, Zhuowen's face was expressionless. He waved his right hand, and a bone spear appeared in his palm. Thud! With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen turned into an illusory afterimage, instantly brushing past the encirclement. In the blink of an eye, the 20 Shenzhen disciples who were encircled suddenly stopped in their tracks. They were like statues, motionless in the air, looking extremely strange. Whoosh! 10 meters away from the encirclement, a tall and straight figure slowly landed on the ground. His hand was holding a bone spear at an angle. At the tip of the spear, drops of bright-colored flower-like blood trickled down. Plop! Plop! Instantly, the 20 Shenzhen disciples who had stopped in their tracks fell to the ground. A deep red line appeared on their necks, and they were all dead. A spear to the throat. Hiss! 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 Everyone gasped as they stared at the 20 Shenzhen disciples who had fallen to the ground in disbelief. These 20 Shenzhen disciples had all been killed in one move? The black-robed man and Old Bai also stared blankly at the 20 Shenzhen disciples' corpses. They did not expect that 20 Shenzhen disciples would be killed just like that. These 20 Shenzhen disciples were all elite disciples of the Shenzhen. Their strength was around the level of the ultimate emperor realm. But now, they had been instantly killed by an ordinary youth. It was a little unbelievable. The smile on Nailan Hongyu's pretty face gradually faded. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at the 20 Shenzhen disciples, who had been instantly killed. She could not help but mutter to herself. 20 Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivators were actually killed in an instant. Could it be my imagination? When she realized that it was not her imagination, the shock on Nailan Hongyu's face became even more intense. Even her delicate body could not help but tremble. How could this youth before her be so powerful? Originally, when this youth had instantly defeated the soldiers she had brought with her, she had thought that he was only a Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Now, it seemed that she had greatly underestimated this youth's strength. Second uncle is still here. When the time comes, This kid will definitely be captured without a fight. Nalan Hongyu's heart only calmed down slightly when she glanced at the black-robed man beside her. After all, the black-robed man was an elder of the Shingzhen, and his strength had reached the ultimate emperor realm. Nalan Hongyu did not believe that this youth before her could be stronger than the black-robed man. You dare to kill my Shingzhen disciples? The black-robed man's eyes widened as he roared angrily. He stared fixedly at Zhuowen, as if he wanted to devour him. You ordered them to kill me, so why can't I kill them? Zhuowen sneered. He raised his head slightly and stared at the black-robed man with a mocking smile on his face. Who do you think you are? It's only right for our Shingzhen to kill you. But for you to kill our Shingzhen disciples, you deserve to die 1,000 times over. Today, you killed 20 of our Shingzhen's elite disciples, so you can stay here forever. The black-robed man snorted coldly, and a terrifying aura erupted from him. His black robe fluttered even though there was no wind, and a strong wind whistled around his body. Elder Nalan is going to attack. I'm afraid this kid is in for it. Elder Nalan's status in Shingzhen is quite high, and his cultivation is above the ultimate emperor realm. He is also one of the strongest in Shingzhen. This youth has killed 20 Shingzhen disciples. This is a disaster. Shingzhen is the holy land of martial arts in this world. This kid is simply courting death by killing Shingzhen's disciples. Many people were shocked when they sensed the sharp killing intent emitted from the black-robed man's body. Their gazes towards Zhuowen were filled with pity and regret. Originally, I just wanted to drive you out of Shingzhen. Unfortunately, not only did you not listen, you even insulted our Shingzhen disciples. And now, you are even more ruthless. You killed 20 of our Shingzhen disciples. You deserve to die 1,000 times over. No one can save you today. The black-robed man stood in the air, looking majestic. He looked down at Zhuowen, and his voice was like thunder rolling out. Nalan Hongyu's face flushed red. Her second uncle was finally going to attack. This young man in front of her was definitely going to die. Haha, deserve to die 1,000 times over? Then you can try. Zhuowen pointed the tip of the bone spear at the black-robed man, and said provocatively. As soon as these words came out, it caused an uproar. No one had expected this kid to dare to provoke the black-robed man at this juncture. Was he not courting death? Since you want to die so much, I will fulfill your wish. The black-robed man was so angry that he laughed. He put his palms together, and a terrifying origin energy gathered in the void behind him. The origin energy surged out and turned into a huge black blade. Absolute black blade. With a low shout, the black-robed man took a step in the void and swooped down. He rushed toward Zhuowen with the huge black blade. Elder Nalan has used his strongest move, Absolute Black Blade. It seems that he wants to kill this young man in front of him with one move. Looking at the huge black blade that appeared beside the black-robed man, many people's eyes were filled with astonishment. Absolute Black Blade was the black-robed man's ultimate move. Many people were quite familiar with it. Slightly raising his head, Zhuowen's eyes were still as calm as an ancient well. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen suddenly rushed up to the sky. The bone spear in his right hand shook, and a mysterious power of essence burst out. Whoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen and the black-robed man passed by each other as if they were strangers. There was no fierce confrontation, nor was there a hot-blooded collision. They just passed by each other calmly. Crack. Then, everyone's pupils shrank as they found that the black-robed man's absolute black blade had completely shattered into countless black fragments in front of everyone's eyes. Puff! The black-robed man spat out a mouthful of blood. His whole body was like a withered butterfly as he flew backward. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. Even the black-robed man did not expect that his absolute black blade would be broken so easily. Moreover, it was not fancy at all. Boom! The black-robed man hit the ground dozens of meters away and spat out another mouthful of blood. His aura was extremely weak. Silence. At this moment, the whole area fell into an eerie silence. Regardless of whether it was the onlookers or Nalan Hongyu, an old bai on the mountain gate, they were all stunned on the spot. Their gazes were all gathered on the miserable figure, who had fallen to the ground and spat out blood dozens of meters away. Disbelief filled almost everyone's faces. The black-robed man, who was also the elder of Shenzhen, was an expert whose strength was above the ultimate emperor stage. Now he was fighting an ordinary youth, and had been defeated in a single blow. When everyone realized that what was happening in front of them was not an illusion, the sound of people sucking in cold air could not help but resound one after another. No one was more shocked than Nailan Hongyu. At this moment, Nailan Hongyu was stunned on the spot. Her beautiful eyes stared at the defeated black-robed man, as her delicate body trembled. How is this possible? Second uncle is an ultimate emperor stage expert. How could he have been defeated by this kid? This is impossible. It must be an illusion. Yes, it must be an illusion. Old Bai's mouth was slightly agape, but his heart was extremely shocked. The strength of the youth before him had already exceeded his imagination. Even the black-robed man had been defeated in a single blow. Elder Nailan, the person you want to drive away is a true monstrous genius. It's not worth it to offend such a genius. Old Bai shook his head, and a trace of pity appeared in his eyes. The youth before him was too terrifying. If the black-robed man had not interfered and insisted on driving him out of Shenzhen, this kid would have already become an inner disciple of Shenzhen. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. Now, because of the black-robed man, it was not very likely that this kid would be able to enter Shenzhen. When he thought of this, Old Bai was extremely uncomfortable with the black-robed man's actions. Unfortunately, his status was not as high as the black-robed man's, and he did not have the right to speak as well. There was nothing he could do. Whoosh. Chapter 8:10. The 10 Great Elders. The black-robed man's pupils shrank to the size of needles as he looked at the young man, who was charging at him with a long spear in his hand. His eyes were filled with fear. He could feel the strong killing intent from Zhuowen, and knew that he was going to kill him. With a loud shout, the black-robed man took out a black talisman. On the surface of the black talisman, there was a picture of a bell and a cauldron. He crushed the talisman and countless black lights surrounded the black-robed man, forming a protective shield in the shape of a bell. Boom! The bone spear arrived on time, and instantly hit the surface of the shield. Countless sparks flew out along with the sound of metal clashing. This shield is strange. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, and looked surprised as he stared at the shield in front of the black-robed man. Thump! 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 The black-robed man retreated dozens of steps, under the recoil of the bone spear. He looked at the young man in front of him with fear and said coldly, "This is the Bell Cauldron Talisman, a protective item given to our Shenzhen elder by the Holy Master. Not only did you kill our Shenzhen disciples, but you also forced me to use the Bell Cauldron Talisman. Your actions are disgraceful. Now let me give you a piece of advice. Surrender immediately, and follow us to the main hall of the Glory Sect. At that time, the Holy Master may be lenient with you." Zhuowen sneered and said, "You are like a stray dog now. Do you have the right to ask me to surrender? Moreover, do you really think that I can't kill you with the Bell Cauldron Talisman?" With that, Zhuowen took a step forward, and arrived in front of the black-robed man. He swung the bone spear in his hand, and a mysterious power spread out, increasing his strength by several times. Bang! The black-robed man, who was inside the Bell Cauldron Talisman, was caught off guard and was hit by the bone spear. He was sent flying like a ball. Boom! Smashing into the ground, the black-robed man spat out a mouthful of blood. His gaze was extremely gloomy. Although the Bell Cauldron Talisman could neutralize most of the attacks, a portion of the attacks would still pass through the Bell Cauldron Talisman and reach the black-robed man, causing his injuries to worsen. Bang bang bang! Before the black-robed man, who had just landed on the ground, could recover from his shock, Zhuowen rushed over once again. The bone spear in his hand unceremoniously lifted him up. Immediately, the black-robed man was like a rubber ball, being hit back and forth in the air. Moreover, every attack caused his injuries to worsen. At this moment, how could the black-robed man not know that this young man's goal was to exhaust him to death within the Bell Cauldron Talisman through repeated attacks? The surrounding crowd looked at the man in the black robe, who had no strength to resist. Their eyes were almost numb. At this moment, the the high and mighty Elder of Glory sect was being abused by an ordinary young man, right in front of their eyes without any strength to resist. Young friend, you can't kill Brother Nalen. Otherwise, Shengzhen will not let you go. Seeing the black-robed man in such a sorry state, Old Bai could not stand it anymore, and tried to persuade him. Zhuowen's gaze was cold, and he completely ignored Old Bai's words. This black-robed man had tried to kill him many times. How could he? Zhuowen, let him go easily. Bang bang bang. Zhuowen's hands were not slow. They were still tirelessly bombarding the Bell Cauldron Talisman. The black-robed man, who was inside the Bell Cauldron Talisman, looked even more dispirited, and the fear in his eyes became even more intense. In the mountain gate, Old Bai's gaze flickered. He stomped his foot, and directly rushed into the mountain gate. He intended to inform Elder Shengzhen of the situation here. Zhuowen naturally noticed Old Bai's departure. He did not deliberately stop him. Instead, he slowly swung his bone spear and sent the black-robed man flying again and again, causing the black-robed man to feel even more humiliated. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Swoosh 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 swoosh. Suddenly, 12 figures appeared in the mountain gate. These figures were led by 2 men with extremely powerful auras. They were dressed in red and green robes respectively. The red-robed man was about 30 years old. The corners of his mouth were full of stubble. His eyelids were drooping, and he looked slightly dispirited. The green-robed man was a stooped old man. The aura that these 2 men exuded was extremely powerful. The left and right protectors of Shengzhen. The left and right protectors are actually here. Looking at the 2 men leading the group, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. The left and right protectors were powerful existences in Shengzhen, second only to the Holy Master. Their strength was above the 4 Reverends' realm, and they had a unique position in Shengzhen. Look, the people behind the left and right protectors are the 10 great elders of Shengzhen. This formation is too terrifying. Soon, many people's eyes noticed the 10 figures behind the left and right protectors. These 10 people were the 10 great elders of Shengzhen. They were the top 10 elders in Shengzhen. Haha, boy, you're finished. The left and right protectors of Shengzhen have brought the 10 great elders here. You'll definitely die. If you know what's good for you, you'd better let me go immediately. Perhaps we'll leave your corpse intact in Shengzhen. The black-robed man also noticed the sudden arrival of the left and right protectors. He couldn't help but laugh maniacally. His gaze towards Zhuowen was filled with mockery. The left and right protectors were very strong. They were both at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm, and the 10 great elders weren't weak either. They were all at the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. This kind of formation was enough to crush any ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. They could even crush some of the weaker Xuanzuan realm cultivators. The black-robed man admitted that Zhuowen was very strong. However, in his opinion, no matter how strong Zhuowen was, he couldn't possibly be a 4 Reverends realm cultivator. Therefore, he knew that Zhuowen was dead meat the moment the left and right protectors arrived. Let you go? Looks like you're overthinking things. Zhuowen shook his head. With a flick of his right hand, the bone spear pierced through the black-robed man's bell and cauldron talisman at a tricky angle like a viper. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing resounded. At the same time, the tip of the bone spear erupted with a demonic blue light. Zhuowen no longer held back this time. He pushed his spear intent to the limit, and the bone spear reached an unprecedented level of sharpness. It's useless. You've struck the bell and cauldron talisman so many times, but you still couldn't break it. It won't be the same this time. The black-robed man laughed loudly. His eyes were filled with mockery. That's not necessarily true. Zhuowen remained expressionless. He clenched his right hand, and the demonic blue light at the tip of the spear suddenly shot out. It spread in all directions, turning into an endless number of blue spear shadows. The bone spear's power had also reached its peak. Crack! A crisp sound rang out. The cracks on the surface of the bell and cauldron talisman gradually spread. In the end, the talisman shattered into countless pieces under the black-robed man's shocked gaze. Spurt! The shadow of the spear flashed past, and a severed arm soared into the sky, dripping with blood. Ah! The black-robed man clutched his empty right arm and screamed hysterically. However, there was more fear on his face. the bell and cauldron talisman, that he was so proud of had actually been so easily broken at this juncture. He truly could not believe it. Looking at the spear-wielding youth before him with a cold gaze, the black-robed man finally felt fear. He was afraid and even regretted. Of all the things he should never have done, why did he provoke such a fiend? Don't kill me. I'm Elder Shengzhen. The left and right protectors are right there. If you kill me, the left and right protectors will definitely not let you off. Clutching his empty right arm, the black-robed man continuously retreated. His entire body trembled, and his voice trembled. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Zhuowen shook his head. The words that he spat out immediately caused the black-robed man to sigh in relief. As long as he did not die, the left and right protectors would definitely be able to save him. At that time, it would not be too late to take revenge. Boom! A pure white palm suddenly slammed into the black-robed man's lower abdomen. A strong wave of yuan power invaded the black-robed man's body and directly shattered the dantian in his abdomen. You actually destroyed my dantian? Spitting out a mouthful of blood, the black-robed man's pupils shrank. He stared blankly at the indifferent youth in front of him. His eyes gradually filled with blood, and his chest was filled with anger. With his dantian destroyed, he would be a complete cripple in the future. For him, this was simply a fate worse than death. Slowly withdrawing his palm, Zhuowen said indifferently, I said that I won't kill you, but I will destroy you. This is the price you should pay. Boy, let go of Elder Nalen. A loud shout suddenly sounded. The left and right protectors above the mountain gate had already led the 10 great elders and descended in the air not far from Zhuowen. Haha, I'll return this piece of trash to you. Zhuowen smiled faintly, raised his foot, and fiercely kicked the black-robed man's chest. Instantly, the latter's waist bent like a shrimp, and he flew out and was caught by the left and right protectors. The left and right protectors' right hands moved and caught the black-robed man. When they discovered that the black-robed man's dantian had been destroyed, their eyes suddenly became extremely gloomy. You actually dared to destroy Elder Nalen's dantian? Don't you know that Elder Nalen is a member of our Shengzhen? Your courage is really big. The right protector, who was slightly older, shouted loudly in shock and anger. Protectors, you have to make a decision for me. This boy is really too hateful. He actually dared to destroy my dantian. And the 20 elite disciples we sent this time were also killed by him. This boy deserves to die. The black-robed man hysterically shouted. The left protector frowned slightly and said lightly, Elder Nalen, don't worry. This boy dared to kill the disciples of our Shengzhen, and even destroyed Elder Shengzhen's dantian. If we don't kill him, how can we serve as a warning to others? As he spoke, the left protector ordered the 10 elders behind him. 10 elders, take action and capture this child. Yes. The 10 great elders nodded and stomped their feet, turning into 10 shadows. Suddenly, they surrounded Zhuowen, and the terrifying momentum of the early stage of the Xuanzuan realm swept out violently. The 10 great elders of Shengzhen. It's too terrifying. This boy is finished. With such a lineup, it's unlikely that he can escape. The surrounding people discussed animatedly, shaking their heads and sighing. Kill. Chapter 8:11. 10 Direction Soul Killing Formation. The auras of the 10 great elders instantly locked onto Zhuowen like invisible chains, binding Zhuowen to the spot. Bang! Suddenly, the attacks of the 10 great elders bombarded Zhuowen's body. Dazzling rays of light burst out like the sun, stimulating the crowd to squint their eyes. Then an earth-shattering explosion resounded. The 10 great elders have taken action. This kid can't escape the fate of death in the end. Many people in the surroundings shook their heads and sighed. The 10 great elders were all experts in the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. When they joined forces, they could erupt with earth-shattering power. No one thought that the young man could survive such a joint attack. Bang! 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 Suddenly, continuous muffled sounds rang out from the explosion in the sky. Then 10 figures in a sorry state retreated from the explosion. They barely managed to stabilize their bodies after retreating dozens of steps. Weren't these 10 figures the 10 great elders who had joined forces to deal with Zhuowen? At this moment, The pupils of the 10 great elders shrank, and their breathing quickened. There was a trace of blood at the corner of their mouths. They had been injured in the confrontation just now. What's going on? How could the 10 great elders be repelled when they joined forces to attack? Everyone was stunned when they saw the 10 great elders' sorry state. Could it be that the mysterious young man was the one who had caused the 10 great elders to be in such a state? Boom! A beam of golden light shot out from the explosion. Then, a 3-meter-tall figure with 3 heads and 6 arms suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It looked like a god or a devil. Is this the young man from before? How did he become like this? Looking at the 3-headed and 6-armed figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, everyone's eyes flickered and revealed a look of astonishment. The 10 great elders being repelled was also beyond the expectations of the left and right protectors. The black-robed man that the left and right protectors had placed at the foot of the mountain gate was even more stunned. He stared at the godlike figure with a complicated gaze. Only now did he realize that the young man in front of him had not used his full strength at all when they were fighting just now. Now, even the 10 elders were forced back by him. How powerful did he have to be to achieve this? The left and right protectors looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The young man in front of them looked to be around 20 years old, but he actually had the strength to repel the 10 great elders. This kid's strength and talent were a little too terrifying. Form the 10-direction soul slaughter formation and completely suppress this kid, the left protector said coldly. Now the left and right protectors' killing intent towards the young man in front of them had weakened a lot. They only wanted to capture him alive and make him submit to Shenzhen. They knew very well that this young man possessed such strength at such a young age and had a bright future ahead of him. They had to make use of this young man for their Shenzhen. If it didn't work, then they could only kill him. The 10 elders nodded. They immediately stabilized themselves and stood in 10 different positions around Zhuowen. Their hands rapidly formed hand seals, and a terrifying power burst out from their bodies. 10-direction soul slaughter formation. There is nowhere to hide. With a low shout, the armor souls in the 10 elders' bodies were released. Under their own power, they formed a terrifying physical body. Moreover, the armor souls of the 10 elders were surprisingly the same. They were all huge and mighty stone statues. The 10 stone statues were arranged in 10 different directions. A mysterious and terrifying power soared into the sky from the 10 stone statues. It actually turned the surrounding area of several dozen miles into a boundary. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless blood-red threads burst out from 10 different directions and rushed towards Zhuowen, who was in the center. These threads were too fast. Before Zhuowen could react, these terrifying blood-red threads had completely bound his limbs. They are actually absorbing the origin energy in my body. The moment the blood-red threads bound him, Zhuowen immediately felt a suction force coming from the blood-red threads and absorbing the origin energy in his body bit by bit. It's Shenzhen's 10-direction soul slaughter formation. The 10 elders have even used such a formation. It seems that this young man is indeed terrifying. However, it will end here. Looking at the boundary suspended in mid-air, many people recognized that it was Shenzhen's famous 10-direction soul slaughter formation. This formation's power was unparalleled. Although the mysterious young man was very strong, no one was optimistic about him. Swoosh! The left and right guardians instantly arrived above the 10-direction soul slaughter formation and looked down at Zhuowen in the town. The left guardian said indifferently, "Why are you deliberately causing trouble in front of our Shenzhen's mountain gate? With your talent, joining our Shenzhen would be the icing on the cake." Slightly raising his head, Zhuowen sneered and said, "You're asking me why I'm deliberately causing trouble? I can clearly tell you that I'm here to join your Shenzhen. Unfortunately, some people insist on driving me out." You're here to participate in Shenzhen's mountain opening ceremony? What's the result of your test? And who dares to drive you out? The right guardian frowned slightly. After listening to Zhuowen's words, it seemed that there was indeed something fishy. It would be best if such a young man with such strength and talent could join their Shenzhen. Who would be stupid enough to drive such a genius out? 2 guardians. This little brother's test result is that he has lit up 10 pearls. His talent is absolutely first class. Moreover, you've seen his strength. It's already comparable to the Xuanzuan realm. Suddenly, from the crowd below, a middle-aged man with a cold expression came out. He glanced at Zhuowen, who was in the 10-direction soul-killing array, and pleaded for him, which was rare. After Zhuowen displayed such great strength, quite a few people felt some admiration for him. Moreover, they were extremely displeased with the black-robed man abusing his power for personal gain and trying to drive away a genius like Zhuowen. If the black-robed man hadn't been crippled, they might not have dared to say anything. However, the black-robed man had been completely crippled by Zhuowen. In the future, he would be a complete waste. Naturally, they had no scruples. Oh, you actually lit up 10 pearls? With such a result, you should be an inner disciple of our Shengzhen. How did things develop to this point? The left guardian's eyes flashed as he continued to ask. It's all because of that elder Nalan. Not only did he directly promote his niece, Nalan Hongyu, to an inner disciple, but because of the conflict between this little brother and Nalan Hongyu, he actually planned to drive this little brother out of Shengzhen. That's why things have developed to this point. The crowd below the mountain gate scrambled to speak up for Zhuowen. Moreover, they all pointed the spearhead at the black-robed man. Oh, is there such a thing? The left guardian's eyes became even gloomier. He turned his head and coldly stared at the pale-faced black-robed man behind him. In his heart, he cursed the black-robed man for being brainless and stupid. He actually dared to drive away such a genius. Nalan Xiong, is what they said true? The left and right guardians turned around at the same time and stared indifferently at the black-robed man. Two guardians, they are definitely talking nonsense. It's clearly this boy who took the initiative to cause trouble in front of the mountain gate. My second uncle only wanted to go forward and stop him, but he never thought that this boy would launch a sneak attack and heavily injure my second uncle. This boy is despicable and shameless. We can't let him go. A sharp voice rang out. Nalan Hongyu had appeared in front of the black-robed man at some unknown time. She pointed at the 10-direction soul kill formation and accused him. Zhuowen's lips curled into a cold smile when he saw Nalan Hongyu acting like a shrew. This Nalan Hongyu really was big-breasted but brainless. She actually dared to make such baseless claims at a time like this. Wasn't she just courting death? As expected, the left and right guardians' eyes gradually turned cold when they heard this. The left guardian said coldly, "You're saying that this little brother launched a sneak attack on your second uncle, and that's why he's in such a sorry state. But this little brother doesn't even fear the combined might of the 10 great elders. Does your second uncle, a mere ultimate emperor realm cultivator, need him to launch a sneak attack on him?" Nalan Hongyu's face froze. The left guardian's words immediately left her speechless, and her face pale. That's right. Zhuowen didn't even fear the combined might of the 10 great elders. His strength had long surpassed the ultimate emperor realm. Did he really need to launch a sneak attack on her second uncle? You're really full of nonsense. I've heard that Elder Nalan wants to promote you to an inner disciple. You're almost 25 years old, but you're only a mere ultimate emperor realm cultivator. What right do you have to become an inner disciple of Shengzhen? The left guardian's voice grew colder and colder. Nalan Hongyu couldn't help but back away. Her pretty face was drained of blood. She knew that it was all over. Humph, you've really lost face for our Shengzhen. Nalan Xiong, you've abused your power for personal gain, and even chased away a genius disciple. You've already committed a great taboo of the Shengzhen. From now on, you're no longer an elder of the Shengzhen. Take your niece, and get out of Shengzhen immediately. The left guardian flicked her sleeve as she spoke coldly. Then, the black-robed man in front of the mountain gate revealed a dispirited expression, and a miserable smile appeared on his face. He knew that everything was over for him. Not only had his Dantian been destroyed, he'd also been chased out of Shengzhen in front of everyone. His life had been ruined. Second uncle Nalan Hongyu looked at the black-robed man in panic. She didn't know what to say. Don't call me second uncle. Nalan Hongyu, because of you, I've become a cripple. Now I've been chased out of Shengzhen. You're really something. The black-robed man laughed loudly. He took out a dagger from his robes and slit his throat. Blood splattered everywhere. The black-robed man's current situation was worse than death. He'd rather die. Nalan Hongyu knelt on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. She finally regretted her actions. She shouldn't have provoked Zhuowen. If she hadn't done so, none of this would have happened. Unfortunately, it was all too late now. What was the use of regretting? Looking at the black-robed man who'd committed suicide, many people below the mountain gate shook their heads and sighed. Because of Nalan Hongyu's selfishness, the black-robed man's life had been completely ruined. This really made people sigh with regret. The left and right guardians' faces were grave and stern. Then they looked at Zhuowen, who was inside the 10-direction killing formation, and said indifferently, Nalan Xiong has already committed suicide. Now it's your turn. Although you're only defending yourself, you've still killed many people from Shenzhen. This debt won't be forgotten so easily. Chapter 8:12. Breaking into Shenzhen. You want me to surrender and leave my life in the hands of your Shenzhen? Do you think that's possible? Zhuowen sneered as he stood within the Shifeng soul-killing formation. You can't even protect yourself now, and you still dare to disobey? The left protector said coldly. Zhuowen shook his head and said indifferently, I will go up to the Shenzhen main hall, but I won't be dragged up there by you. I will be the one to break into it. As he spoke, Zhuowen let out a loud shout, and an even more blazing golden light burst forth. His entire form changed from 3 heads and 6 arms to 4 heads and 8 arms. Rumble! An extremely terrifying power burst out from Zhuowen's body. Then the countless blood-red threads that the Shifeng soul-killing formation wrapped around Zhuowen's body were all torn apart. Let's break it! Zhuowen roared at the sky. His 8 arms hammered into the air, and a terrifying power spread out in all directions with him as the center. Cracks began to appear in the space. Crack! A crisp sound resounded. The boundary formed by the Shifeng soul-killing formation collapsed completely at this moment. The 10 stone statues were also unable to withstand such a terrifying power, and were completely shattered into pieces. Pfft! The 10 elders sitting on the stone statues spat out mouthfuls of blood, and were sent flying in all directions. They looked extremely dispirited. Their eyes were filled with intense disbelief and fear. The decapitation soul-killing formation had actually been broken just like that. This young man is too terrifying. Has he been hiding his strength from the beginning? Did he only use his full strength now? The left and right protectors were both shocked and furious. They had not expected this young man to be so daring as to break into Shenzhen. What shocked them even more was that the 10-directional souls killing formation was actually broken by him. The strength of this child somewhat exceeded their expectations. A red and a blue chi burst out from the bodies of the 2 protectors and turned into a red and blue disc in the void. A terrifying aura that could shake the heavens and earth was emitted from the red and blue disc, faintly causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Heaven and earth disc, only I am supreme. The left and right protectors shouted. The huge red and blue disc rumbled towards Zhuowen with a frightening might and noise. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. It was an extremely frightening sight. This spear has a soul. It's called Spear Intent. Zhuowen gave a loud shout as his 8 arms simultaneously unleashed the great perfection Spear Intent. Suddenly, countless blue crystals condensed and formed a huge and mighty blue spear in front of him. Whoosh! Like an arrow leaving the bowstring, the blue spear suddenly shot out, tearing through the void, and instantly slammed into the red and blue disc in the void. Rumble! A terrifying explosion suddenly resounded at this moment. The huge blue spear and the rotating red and blue disc instantly collided in the void, and then both of them stagnated. Break it for me. 8 arms holding 8 spears. Zhuowen stepped on the void and turned into a ray of light arrow. In an instant, he reached the handle of the blue spear in the sky. Then, his 8 arms smashed down heavily again. The power that erupted from this smash was earth-shattering, almost causing the surrounding void to shake violently. Then, traces of cracks appeared on the surface of the red and blue disc that was in a deadlock in the air. Crack! In the end, the red and blue round plates were completely shattered into countless pieces in front of everyone's eyes. The blue long spear was like a hot knife through butter as it directly rushed out. In an instant, it rushed towards the left and right protectors, who were still stunned. Left protector, let's join forces to block this blue spear. The right protector was the first to react. He hurriedly shouted and swung his right hand, causing a red force to surge out. The left protector's movement was not slow either, and a blue force also swept out from his body. The blue and red forces intertwined and turned into a Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern, revolving in front of the two of them, wanting to completely block the blue spear. Boom! The blue spear's power was indeed terrifying. When it pressed against the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern, it actually caused the pattern to shake continuously, causing the left and right protectors to feel uneasy. Bang! In the end, due to the lack of energy, the blue spear completely disappeared under the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern. As the left and right protectors heaved a sigh of relief, a piercing sound suddenly swept out. They did not know when Zhuowen had actually appeared above them. His 8 arms were wrapped in a monstrous aura, and he suddenly smashed down, causing the two of them to be frightened and their hearts to beat rapidly. Rumble! This time, Zhuowen had truly used all of his strength. Together with the peak of spear intent, he had unleashed the power of this attack to the extreme. Without exception, the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern in front of the left and right protectors was directly shattered. Then, a cold bone spear shaft heavily smashed into the left and right protectors' chests. Puff! Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, the left and right protectors spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out, smashing into the mountain gate. At this moment, the entire mountain gate became silent. No one made any sound. They only held their breaths and silently watched this scene. After a long period of silence, uproar, noise, and discussion swept out continuously from the foot of the mountain, in the sea of people. The left and right protectors in addition to the 10 great elders. With such a powerful lineup, the crowd originally thought that they would be able to take down the young man in front of them. However, the result that appeared before them now greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. The Shifeng soul-killing array formed by the 10 great elders had been broken. The left and right protectors had joined forces, but were also defeated. Now they were in a sorry state like stray dogs. Too powerful. The strength displayed by this young man in front of them was too powerful. At the foot of the mountain, many young juniors stared at Zhuowen's figure. Their eyes were full of admiration. Zhuowen's age was not much different from theirs. However, he was able to defeat the 10 great elders and the 2 great protectors of Shenzhen. This kind of achievement was simply the dream of these young boys and girls. Now that Zhuowen had achieved it, these juniors could not help but put themselves in Zhuowen's shoes. Instead, their faces were more excited and happy than Zhuowen himself. Zhuowen no longer paid attention to the left and right protectors. He stepped forward and entered the mountain gate. He only had one purpose for this trip. That was to find the Enlightenment Cliff of Shenzhen and stay there for 3 years. From there, he could comprehend the general trend of heaven and earth to deal with the invasion of the demonic creatures 3 years later. Left and right protectors. This kid has trespassed into Shenzhen. What should we do? The 10 great elders gathered in front of the left and right protectors at the mountain gate. Their expressions were not very good. To think that their Shenzhen was so famous. Today, a kid who smelled like milk had barged in. This was a ruthless slap in the face. Let's go and inform the Lord Holy Leader. This kid is too arrogant. He actually dares to trespass into Shenzhen. He absolutely cannot be forgiven. The left and right protectors' expressions were gloomy. They coldly snorted and rushed into the mountain gate. Clearly, they were planning to inform the Lord of Shenzhen. Lord Holy Leader? The 10 great elders looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock. The Lord of Shenzhen's whereabouts had always been mysterious. He was elusive and elusive. He was extremely mysterious. Perhaps only the left and right protectors, whose positions were second only to the Lord Holy Leader, knew his whereabouts. Now that the left and right protectors had spoken, it was likely that the Lord Holy Leader was really going to come out of the mountain. With that, the 10 great elders turned into phantoms and disappeared from the mountain gate. Very quickly, they were submerged in the misty clouds. At this moment, the people at the foot of the mountain were the most shocked. They were all stunned on the spot. With such a thing happening in Shenzhen today, the mountain opening ceremony was no longer meaningful. This was especially true for the juniors who had passed the test. At this moment, all of them had long faces. Because of Zhuowen, they had been completely ignored. Shenzhen had no time to care about them. It was also impossible for him to arrange for someone to bring them into Shenzhen. Who is that young man? What is his purpose in trespassing into Shenzhen? All of these doubts lingered in everyone's hearts. They were itching to find out more, but no one dared to take a step into Shenzhen's mountain gate. A long time ago, Shenzhen had stipulated that those who were not from Shenzhen were not allowed to enter Shenzhen. Once they did, they would be killed without mercy. The moment he stepped into the mountain gate, Zhuowen was presented with a white staircase that led upwards. Above the staircase, there was a white fog that blocked his vision. It looked mysterious and beautiful. Shenzhen should be at the end of this staircase, Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. With a flick of his right hand, a white uniform suddenly appeared in his hand. This white uniform was secretly put away by Zhuowen when he killed the Shenzhen's disciples. Although Zhuowen intended to break into Shenzhen, there was no need to be so ostentatious. This was because he knew that there were many powerful restrictions in Shenzhen. Moreover, there were many experts in Shenzhen. Although he could defeat the left and right guardians single-handedly, there were probably many warriors in the Xuanzuan realm in this huge Shenzhen. If they all attacked together, Zhuowen would have a hard time. In addition, Shenzhen also had the mysterious Saint Lord. He was very clear that the Saint Lord's cultivation was definitely higher than the left and right guardians. He might even be much stronger than the left and right guardians, so he had to be careful. After putting on the Shenzhen's disciple uniform, Zhuowen took a step and disappeared from the white staircase. Not long after Zhuowen left, the left and right guardians and the 10 elders rushed over. When they found that Zhuowen's figure was not on the staircase, their faces became extremely gloomy. This guy ran away pretty fast. The left guardian snorted coldly. The right guardian's eyes flashed and said, "Left guardian, let's join forces and go to the Saint Lord's mountain to ask for the Saint Lord's help." Yes, this kid's strength is indeed terrifying. If I'm not wrong, this kid's cultivation is at least at the early stage of the Supreme Being realm. Only the Saint Lord can suppress this kid. The left guardian nodded as he recalled Zhuowen's terrifying figure. Even now, he still felt a trace of lingering fear. This kid was too terrifying. Sigh. It's said that this kid originally participated in the test to join Shenzhen. Now that such a thing has happened, it's all Nailan Xiong's fault. He's really as stupid as a pig, one of the 10 elders said with some disappointment. The left guardian shook his head and said, "Since it has already happened, there's no need to mention it. What we have to face now is how to capture that young man as soon as possible." The left guardian is right. Let's go to the Saint Lord's mountain first. Chapter 8:13. Yao Shualing. The clouds gradually dissipated, revealing a rather tall mountain peak in front of Zhuowen. However, the mountainside was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been cut in half by a sharp arrow. Zhuowen raised his head and looked at the mountain peak. There were countless pavilions, terraces, and pavilions, and there was a huge platform at the top of the mountain. On the platform, many youths dressed in Shenzhen disciple uniforms were practicing martial arts. It seems that this mountain peak is where the Shenzhen disciples gather. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hint of contemplation. He blended into the crowd of disciples at the foot of the mountain and walked up the mountain path. Soon he reached the platform at the top of the mountain. At this moment, hundreds of Shenzhen disciples were gathered on the platform. There were both male and female disciples, and most of them were holding swords. They were gesticulating back and forth, practicing sword techniques. There were also some who were practicing martial arts, and some who were sitting cross-legged and cultivating. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that the disciples on the platform were all above the Ultimate Emperor realm. The strongest among them was around the Ultimate Emperor realm. They could be considered the elite disciples of Shenzhen. He also discovered that the disciples who were practicing martial arts on the platform had a faint trace of arrogance on their faces. The disciples standing around the platform all had looks of envy on their faces. At the same time, he also discovered that the disciples who were practicing martial arts on the platform were wearing different uniforms from the disciples around them. The former's white uniforms were inlaid with golden borders, while the latter's were inlaid with gray borders. I wonder when we'll be promoted from the outer sect to the inner sect. When the time comes, we'll also be able to practice martial arts on this platform. At the same time, we'll also be able to obtain the true teachings of Shenzhen. Our cultivation will improve by leaps and bounds. It's not that easy to be promoted to the inner sect. It's said that to be promoted from the outer sect to the inner sect, one's cultivation must reach the ultimate emperor realm before the age of 25. Anyway, I'm almost 25. It's unlikely that I'll be able to meet this requirement. Sigh. This requirement is so harsh. I'm afraid I won't have any hope of being promoted. However, it's still an honor to be an outer sect disciple. At the very least, we'll be considered disciples of Shenzhen. It'll be an identity for us to go out and train in the future. The surrounding disciples discussed animatedly. They looked at the inner sect disciples on the platform with eyes full of envy. At the same time they sighed. They didn't have much hope of being promoted. In response to the sighs of the surrounding outer sect disciples, Zhuowen shook his head inwardly. These outer sect disciples' martial wills were too weak, and didn't have any desire to improve. If they continued to hold such negative thoughts, they would never be able to become an inner court disciple, let alone achieve anything in this lifetime. Of course, the purpose of Zhuowen's trip was the Enlightenment Cliff of Glory sect. Naturally, he would not say anything to these outer sect disciples. He pulled over an outer sect disciple who was passing by. The outer sect disciple was enraged because he was suddenly held back. Just as he was about to explode, he suddenly saw Zhuowen's inner sect disciple uniform. His face stiffened, and he hurriedly said respectfully, "Senior brother, do you have any advice for me?" The 20 Shenzhen disciples brought by the black-robed man and elder were all inner sect disciples. Therefore, Zhuowen was wearing the uniform of an inner sect disciple. "Do you know where the Shenzhen Enlightenment Cliff is?" Zhuowen asked in a low voice. The outer sect disciple was surprised. He shook his head and said, "Senior brother, the Enlightenment Cliff is the most important thing in Shenzhen. It's not something an outer sect disciple like me can know. In Shenzhen, only the core disciples and the elders of Shenzhen can enter the Enlightenment Cliff. Even the inner sect disciples aren't qualified." Hearing this, Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect the Shenzhen Enlightenment Cliff to be so strict that even the inner sect disciples weren't qualified to enter. "Junior brother, can you tell me where I can find a core disciple?" Zhuowen asked with a twinkle in his eyes. Hearing this, the outer sect disciple was embarrassed. He said, "Senior brother, you don't know. The core disciples are the core geniuses of Shenzhen. There are only 10 of them in the whole of Shenzhen. It's impossible for us to know where they are." "Oh, is there no one who knows?" Zhuowen asked with a frown. "There is, but this person is not easy to provoke. I advise senior brother to give up on this idea." The outer sect disciple shook his head. "Junior brother, please tell me. This is a little token of my appreciation. I hope you don't mind." Zhuowen calmly took out a medium-level spirit stone from his spiritual ring and handed it to the outer sect disciple. There were many similarities between this world and the outside world. The currency was also spirit stones. For the outer sect disciples, medium-level spirit stones were quite precious. Looking at the medium-level spirit stone handed over by Zhuowen, the outer sect disciple's eyes widened. He quickly took it and put it in his arms. He looked around carefully. After he found that no one had seen him, he let out a sigh of relief and became extremely enthusiastic towards Zhuowen. "Senior brother, do you see the woman in the middle of the martial arts practice field?" The outer sect disciple pointed at the center of the martial arts practice field and whispered. Following the outer sect disciple's finger, Zhuowen naturally saw a slender and elegant figure in the middle of the martial arts practice field. She held a silver sword in her hand and was constantly brandishing it. The cold light of the sword constantly flashed. This young woman had an extremely delicate appearance. Especially when coupled with her enchanting figure as she danced with the sword, She attracted countless burning gazes from the surroundings. However, this woman's expression was extremely cold. There was also a trace of arrogance in her coldness, like a proud peacock dancing gracefully. This woman is called Yao Shualing. She is extremely talented. She is only 18 years old, but she is already an expert at the initial stage of the six-wheel emperor realm. She is ranked third among the inner sect disciples. The two people in front of her are both over 20 years old. In terms of talent, Yao Shualing can be called the number one in the inner sect. As the outer sect disciple spoke, his gaze was fixed on Yao Shualing. His eyes were filled with intense passion. Yao Shualing was extremely popular in Shenzhen. Many young disciples had pursued her. Unfortunately, she had extremely high standards and rejected many of them. Even the first and second inner sect disciples, Tai Ta and Yushi, were rejected by her. Senior brother, you are an inner sect disciple. You should know more about Yao Shualing than I do. However, there is one thing you definitely don't know. This woman has an elder brother called Yao Yan. Yao Yan is one of the top 10 core disciples. However, there are too few disciples who know about this. I only heard about it from an elder by accident. If you want to find out where the core disciples are, you can definitely find Yao Shualing. At this point, the outer sect disciple was slightly worried and said, Senior brother, you have to be careful. Although Yao Shualing looks delicate and weak, she is extremely decisive and ruthless when she fights. Senior brother, it's best if you don't provoke this woman too much. Zhuowen nodded and replied casually. However, his eyes were filled with intense light. It seemed that there was hope for him to find the Enlightenment rock wall. Thinking of this, Zhuowen lifted his foot and walked towards Yao Shualing in the middle of the martial arts practice field. Zhuowen's action immediately attracted the attention of many people. Basically, no one was within 10 meters of Yao Shualing in the middle of the martial arts practice field. However, Zhuowen's action was too obvious. It was obvious that he was walking towards Yao Shualing in the middle. Who is this guy? He actually dares to swagger towards junior sister Yao. How come I've never seen this guy before? This guy looks very unfamiliar. Quite a number of people narrowed their eyes and stared at Zhuowen, who was walking towards Yao Shualing in an unfriendly manner. Some of the disciples, who were originally practicing martial arts, also stopped their actions as their gazes gathered on Zhuowen's body. When he was 5 meters away from Yao Shualing, Zhuowen slowly stopped and calmly stared at the beautiful girl in front of him. Yao Shualing also noticed the approaching Zhuowen. She stopped her sword dance and turned around. Looking at the ordinary-looking young man in front of her, she frowned and said, If you want to express your love or confess, you can leave now. Insignificant inner sect disciples are not worthy of my attention. Zhuowen was startled. Before he could open his mouth, this Yao Shualing actually said such a sentence. This made Zhuowen feel quite surprised. It seemed that this Yao Shualing was indeed a hot potato in Shenzhen. She was usually very popular, but she was actually so familiar with this kind of situation. For a moment, Zhuowen was amused and deliberately said, So the inner sect disciples are not worthy of Miss Yao's attention. Does that mean that in Miss Yao's heart, only the core disciples are worthy of you? Yao Shualing indifferently glanced at Zhuowen and coldly said, That's natural. The inner sect disciples are just a bunch of good-for-nothings. With my aptitude, it's only a matter of time before I become a core disciple. The gap between me and the inner sect disciples will only grow bigger and bigger. How can they be worthy of me? You should leave on your own. Zhuowen shook his head and lightly smiled. I agree with your words. I also think that the inner sect disciples are a bunch of useless trash. However, I'm not here to express my love for Miss Yao. I'm here to find your brother Yao Yan. Yao Shualing looked at Zhuowen with some surprise. She did not expect that the young man in front of her was actually looking for her brother and not her. For a moment, she revealed a trace of astonishment. You know a lot, but my brother is a core disciple. What qualifications do you have to see him? Yao Shualing said with a heavy face. Zhuowen shook his head and smiled. I just want to challenge Yao Yan. Since Miss Yao said so, does that mean that Yao Yan is afraid of a fight and deliberately used this kind of excuse to avoid a fight? This Yao Shualing in front of him was a little young. Zhuowen knew that if he spoke in a calm tone, there was an 80% chance that he would succeed. He could only use the method of provocation. Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen spoke these words, Yao Shuling clenched her fists and said coldly, "You're really shameless. You're even challenging my brother? You're really overestimating your ability. It looks to me like you might not even be a match for me." Then Miss Yao's words mean that if I defeat you, then you will take me to see Yao Yan? Zhuowen said with a smile that was not a smile. Yao Shuling gnashed her teeth in anger when she saw Zhuowen's appearance, as if his scheme had succeeded. Even though she faintly felt that something wasn't right in her heart, she still couldn't restrain her anger, and she said coldly, "Exactly. If you're able to defeat me, then I'll bring you to see Big Brother." Zhuowen and Yao Shuling's face-to-face conversation, for such a long time, also caused many of the surrounding disciples to be astonished. In the past, the disciples who expressed their love were basically rejected by Yao Shuling and left dejectedly. Chapter 8:14. Core Disciple. Who is this kid? How dare he approach Xueling? On the empty ground on the left side of the martial arts practice ground, a huge man who looked like a metal tower was waving an enormous meteor hammer. At this moment, he had also noticed Zhuowen, who was conversing with Yao Shuling. There was not a single person within 10 meters of the giant man. There were quite a number of inner sect disciples who were staring at the giant man with fear. From the surrounding discussions, it was not difficult to tell that this person was the #1 iron tower in the inner sect. On the right side of the training field, there was a similar empty space. A cold man with a pair of triangular eyes stared at Zhuowen, who was in the center. His eyes were filled with coldness. This man was the second in command of the inner court, Yuxi. Both Tai Ta and Yuxi were once Yao Shuling's suitors. However, the latter's standards were too high. She looked down on both of them. Although Yao Shuling's rejection made both of them angry, they knew about Yao Shuling's background. Her brother was a core disciple, Yao Yan. They could not afford to offend him. Therefore, they could only suppress their anger in their hearts. Fortunately, Yao Shuling kept the other inner court disciples at arm's length. Therefore, although the two of them failed to express their love, they were not too discouraged. After all, everyone's outcome was the same. However, a young man they had never seen before was now so close to Yao Shuling. Moreover, they were talking about a lot of things. This was something that they would not normally see. Therefore, Tai Ta and Yuxi did not look too good. Both of them were the first and second in the inner court disciples. Even they could not talk much in front of Yao Shuling. However, this unknown young man in front of them was talking to her for so long. Therefore, their gazes gradually turned cold. There was a trace of jealousy in their hearts. What right does this brat who stinks of milk have to get close to Xueling? Swimming Snake licked his lips and stamped his feet. His whole body was like a viper hunting its prey. He suddenly rushed toward Zhuowen at an extreme speed, turning into an afterimage. Originally, Tai Ta wanted to make a move. However, when he saw that Yuxi had made the first move, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. Yuxi's strength was at the early stage of the ultimate six-wheel emperor realm. Although he was much weaker than Tai Ta, he was still an ordinary inner sect disciple. Tai Ta also wanted to see how the unfamiliar young man, who was close to Yao Shuling, would end up under the attack of the swimming snake. At this moment, while Zhuowen was discussing the matter of the competition with Yao Shuling, a sound that tore through the air suddenly flashed over. Then, Zhuowen acutely noticed that the corners of Yao Shuling's mouth revealed a wisp of a mocking smile. "Looks like I don't need to do anything. Someone has already done it for me. Let me warn you in advance. It's best if you know your limits." After saying this, Yao Shuling quietly took a few steps back. The terrifying sound of something tearing through the air instantly swept through the martial arts arena. It attracted the attention of many Shenzhen disciples. When they saw the figure that resembled a viper, their gazes immediately stiffened. However, when they saw the figure that roaming serpent had flashed out, their eyes were instantly filled with ridicule, because the direction that roaming serpent had flashed out was exactly where Yao Shuling was at the center of the training grounds. They all knew that Yushi's target was probably the young man who was recklessly walking toward Yao Shuling. Therefore, many people's eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Yushi actually made a move. That young man is going to suffer. Zhuowen still stood silently amidst the crowd's discussion. He'd already noticed the moment Yushi had made a move, but he didn't care. Or perhaps it could be said that he didn't care at all. So Miss Yao means that if I defeat the person behind me, you'll take me to see Yao Yan? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Yao Shuling hadn't expected that the young man before her would be so calm and composed under such circumstances. A trace of doubt arose in her heart. Defeat Yushi first. Yao Shuling shook her head and said ambiguously. Swoosh. At the same time, Yushi's figure instantly appeared behind Zhuowen. His right hand took the shape of a snake and swept towards Zhuowen's neck. This attack was very powerful, and it was enough to cripple an ordinary Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Unfortunately, just as Yushi's palm was about to reach Zhuowen's neck, a hand gently flashed out and suddenly pinched Yushi's palm. Crack! Yushi's face stiffened. The moment his palm was pinched, he felt as if he'd been bound by a sturdy iron hoop. He couldn't move at all. Then, a huge force came, and the bones in his right hand were directly torn apart. Ah! Let go of me! Yushi screamed miserably. His wrist had been broken by Zhuowen. The pain of having his bones broken was extremely intense. He cried out in pain, and suddenly struck out with his free left hand, in an attempt to force Zhuowen to let go. However, Zhuowen shook his head and moved his shoulder. Yushi's body instantly became unstable, and he was thrown to the ground by Zhuowen. Boom! Yushi crashed heavily to the ground, and almost fainted. Then a foot fiercely stomped on his chest. Zhuowen hadn't even glanced at Yushi from beginning to end. His gaze was fixed on Yao Shuling as he said indifferently, Miss Yao, now that I've proven my strength, quickly take me to see Yao Yan. The martial arts practice field fell into silence. In this silent atmosphere, only Yushi's mournful screams could be heard. The second-ranked inner disciple, Yushi, had been defeated so easily by a strange disciple. Now, he was even being stepped on without being able to resist. At this moment, Yushi's face was full of humiliation. He was usually high and mighty as the second-ranked inner disciple, and was revered by many inner disciples. However, today, in front of everyone, he was being stepped on by someone's right foot. This was a complete disgrace. Yao Shuling was also stunned. She had never thought that Yushi would be defeated so easily. Yushi was slightly stronger than her. If even Yushi was defeated, didn't that mean that she would also be defeated if she were to fight with this young man? Yushi is only the second-ranked inner disciple. If you can defeat the first-ranked inner disciple, Tai-Ta, then I'll take you to see my brother. Yao Shuling was still somewhat unconvinced. Tai-Ta, sure, remember what you said. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Zhuowen coldly glanced at Yao Shuling. A terrifying killing intent flashed across Yao Shuling's eyes, causing her body to turn cold. She had never seen such cold and emotionless eyes. This young man in front of her was terrifying. Who is Tai-Ta? Get out here! Zhuowen shouted at the martial arts practice field. As soon as these words came out, the crowd was in an uproar. This inner disciple who had suddenly appeared not only defeated the second-ranked inner disciple, Yushi, but also threatened Tai-Ta to get out here. He was too arrogant. Dang! 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 A huge figure stepped out from not far away. This person was more than 10 feet tall, and was as sturdy as Tai-Ta. He held an exaggeratedly huge meteor hammer in his hands. This should be the first-ranked inner disciple, Tai-Ta. At this moment, Tai-Ta stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, Do you think you can challenge me just because you defeated Yushi? You'd better not compare me to that trash, Yushi. When Yushi, who was being stepped on by Zhuowen, heard these words, he was so angry that he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He glared fiercely at Tai-Ta, who was not far away. Tai-Ta's words were too impolite. He had said that Yushi was trash. Because of what had happened today, Yushi would not be able to lift his head up among the inner disciples anymore. It's all the same to me. Zhuowen shook his head and kicked Yushi away. With a stomp of his foot, he charged towards Tai-Ta at an extremely fast speed. Seeing Zhuowen charging towards him, Tai-Ta roared angrily. The meteor hammer in his hands danced quickly, and a terrifying gale swept up around his body. Whistling meteor. Taita roared as countless gales swept out. Surging origin energy gushed out, forming countless meteor lights. Then he swung both his hands, throwing the meteor hammers at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze was as calm as ever. The instant the whistling meteor flew towards him, he extended his right hand and caught it. Then, Zhuowen clenched his fist, and the whistling meteor formed by the meteor hammer shattered. Whoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen arrived in front of Taita. His right hand clenched into a fist and slammed into Taita's chest. The crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Taita's pupils contracted, and his waist arched like a shrimp as he was sent flying. Boom! Taita landed heavily on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was dispirited. Taita was defeated in one move, and the surroundings fell silent again. The first and second ranked inner disciples could not even take one move from this young man. Slowly walking towards Yao Shuiling, Zhuowen said indifferently, "It's time to bring me to Yao Yan." At this moment, Yao Shuiling slowly came back to her senses. She was still in shock. Taita was defeated in one move. That was too much. Slowly coming back to her senses, Yao Shuling's eyes flickered. She said coldly, "My brother is a core disciple. You're seeking your own death by challenging him. I think you should give up." Although Zhuowen had shown great strength, she still believed that Yao Yin was stronger. If Yao Yin was here, he could also defeat Yu Shi and Taita in one move. "My patience is limited. If you don't bring me to Yao Yin, you'll end up in a worse state than Yu Shi and Taita." Zhuowen did not want to play word games with Yao Shuiling. His voice became extremely cold, and a blood-red killing intent slowly flowed out from his body. Feeling the terrifying killing intent from Zhuowen's body, Yao Shuiling trembled. In this killing intent, she seemed to see a mountain of corpses, a sea of blood, and the Azura hell. How many people did this young man have to kill to release such a terrifying killing intent? Yao Shuling's pretty face was pale. She lowered her head, not daring to look into Zhuowen's eyes. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with indifference and ruthlessness. It was a coldness that disregarded life. This coldness was very, very cold, and it made one's body tremble. "I'll bring you there." Biting her lower lip, Yao Shuiling finally gave in. Just the aura released by the young man in front of her was enough to make Yao Shuiling unable to resist. "That's good. Lead the way," Zhuowen said indifferently. His gaze relaxed, and the coldness on his body gradually disappeared. Chapter 8:15. Yao Yin. After reaching an agreement, Yao Shuiling led Zhuowen out of the martial arts practice field under the astonished gazes of many disciples. "Who is that young man? What a terrifying fellow." "That's right. Yu Shi and Taita couldn't even withstand a single blow from him. When did such a terrifying disciple appear in Shenzhen?" After Yao Shuiling and Zhuowen left, many of the surrounding disciples began to discuss animatedly. They were extremely excited. Along the way, Yao Shuiling led the way while Zhuowen silently followed. The two of them didn't communicate at all as they walked in silence. Soon, the two of them walked out of the mountain peak. Zhuowen had already heard about the structure of Shenzhen when they were at the foot of the mountain. There were a total of 4 mountain peaks in Shenzhen. The peak that Zhuowen had entered was the Disciple Peak. Other than the Disciple Peak, the other 3 peaks were the Elder's Peak, the Sacred Master's Peak, and the Trio Crack. As the name implied, the Elder's Peak was naturally the peak where the Elder of Shenzhen resided. The Sacred Master's Peak was the peak where the Sacred Master of Shenzhen resided. As for the Trio Crack, it was a peculiar peak where the people of Shenzhen trained. When Yao Shuiling brought him to find Yao Yin, Zhuowen knew that the peak where the core disciples resided was on the Trio Peak. Moreover, Zhuowen suspected that the Enlightenment Rock Cliff of Shenzhen should be on the Trio Peak. After a while, Yao Shuiling stopped in front of a huge mountain peak. She turned her head and said coldly to Zhuowen, "This is the Trio Peak. My elder brother, Yao Yin, is training on this Trio Peak." Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen looked up at the strange mountain peak in front of him, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. The mountain peak in front of him was strangely shaped. and it was entirely crimson in color. There were 3 forks at the top of the mountain peak, and it looked like a flame symbol. At the foot of the mountain, there were 2 old men in gray robes lazily leaning against the mountain gate. They should be the guards of the mountain. However, these 2 gray-robed elders were not weak. They were both at the early stage of the ultimate 7-wheel emperor realm. At this moment, the 2 elders also noticed Yao Shuling and Zhuowen. Their eyes lit up. Why have the 2 of you come to Training Peak? As inner sect disciples, the 2 of you should know that the Training Peak is a forbidden area for you. One of the gray-robed old men said indifferently. Yao Shuling cupped her hands respectfully and took out a talisman. She passed it to the gray-robed old man and said, I'm Yao Shuling. Yao Yin is my elder brother, and this talisman was given to me by my elder brother. When they heard Yao Yan's name, the 2 gray-robed old men's eyes narrowed slightly. They hurriedly took the talisman from Yao Shuling's hand and examined it carefully. They nodded and said, It is indeed Yao Yan's talisman. Since Miss Yao is Yao Yan's relative, you can enter. However, the person beside you. At this point, the gray-robed old man stopped talking. It was very obvious that Yao Shuling could enter the trial peak, but Zhuowen, who was by Yao Shuling's side, could not enter. Yao Shuling's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of craftiness. She indifferently said to Zhuowen, I've already brought you to the trial peak. Unfortunately, you don't have the qualifications to enter the trial peak, so you should return on your own. As she spoke, Yao Shuling glanced at Zhuowen with schadenfreude. Under the gazes of the 2 gray-robed old men, she entered the mountain gate. She even turned around and gave Zhuowen a meaningful look before leaving Zhuowen. Irrelevant people can leave, the gray-robed old man coldly said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and indifferently said, You said I'm irrelevant? I came with Yao Shuling. Do you think I'm irrelevant? The gray-robed old man sneered and said, If she wanted to do something, why did she ignore you and leave you behind to enter the trial peak? Get lost. The trial peak is not a place you can enter. Is that so? Zhuowen was too lazy to talk nonsense with the 2 gray-robed old men. Since the trial peak was so close, how could he, Zhuowen, let it go so easily? With a step, Zhuowen turned into a lightning shadow. Under the astonished gazes of the 2 gray-robed old men, he instantly disappeared into the mountain gate. Before the 2 old men could even react, Zhuowen's figure had already disappeared. Seeing Zhuowen's figure disappear in an instant, the 2 gray-robed old men were stunned. They didn't even catch a glimpse of Zhuowen's shadow. What a fast speed. This kid is so arrogant. He actually dares to barge into the trial peak. Let's chase after him. After reacting, the 2 gray-robed old men's faces became extremely ugly. They looked at each other, turned into 2 gray shadows, and quickly rushed into the mountain gate. After entering the mountain gate, there was a precipitous mountain path that was like a thin line of sky. At this moment, Yao Shuling was slowly walking within this thin line of sky. Her pretty face was already filled with a rich complacency. Who told that guy to scare me? I won't let him enter the trial peak. I'll just let him watch from the outside. Let's see what he can do. As Yao Shuling spoke, she couldn't help but think of the terrifying killing intent that erupted from Zhuowen's body. That killing intent was very cold, terrifying, and sinister. She had never felt such a deep cold intent from anyone. Even her brother didn't have such a terrifying killing intent. She knew that the young man from before must have had an extraordinary experience. Whoosh! A lightning shadow swept past and stopped in front of Yao Shuling. Then, Yao Shuling's delicate body stiffened. She stared at the indifferent man, who was looking down at her from above. Her entire body was stunned. She couldn't help but exclaim, You actually barged into the trial peak? Where are the core disciples in the trial peak? Zhuowen didn't directly answer Yao Shuling's question. Instead, he silently stared at the ladder and asked word by word. His voice started to become extremely cold. Speak or die. A terrifying killing intent descended once again. Yao Shuling's body couldn't help but tremble. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 gray shadows swept over from the bottom of the mountain path. The 2 gray-robed elders had also arrived. When they saw Zhuowen in the line of sky, they immediately shouted, You have some guts. You actually dared to barge into the trial peak. Quickly surrender. Take me to where the core disciples are. Otherwise, your end will be the same as these two old fellows. After indifferently spitting out these words, Zhuowen stomped his foot. Two blue spear shadows swept out from his body. Then two pillars of blood spurted out. A bloody hole appeared between the eyebrows of the two gray-robed elders. Plop! The gray-robed elder didn't even make a sound. He fell down from the line of sky without any signs of life. He was clearly dead. Ah, you killed the Trial Peak's gatekeeper elders? Seeing the two gray-robed elders killed in an instant, Yao Shuling's body trembled. She cried out in alarm. Her heart was extremely flustered. The man in front of her was actually so daring. He actually dared to kill the Trial Peak's gatekeeper elders. Was he not afraid of Xingzhen's punishment? Speak or die. Zhuowen's voice was still cold. It was so cold that Yao Shuling's heart beat wildly. I'll take you there. The core disciples are halfway up the trial peak. There are 10 floating stone platforms there. Those are the places where the 10 core disciples cultivate. Yao Shuling had no choice but to compromise. The youth in front of her was too terrifying. Especially his ruthless methods of killing people. She knew that if she didn't speak, her fate would be the same as the two gatekeeper elders. They would both die. Let's go. Zhuowen didn't hold back this time. Carrying Yao Shuling in his right hand, he took a step forward and quickly flew up the trial peak. Under Yao Shuling's guidance, Zhuowen quickly arrived at the halfway point of the trial peak. Halfway up the mountain, there was a huge open-air stone hall. Above the stone hall floated 10 dazzling stone platforms. On the 10 stone platforms, there were naturally 10 dignified figures. There were both men and women among the 10 figures. There were a total of 7 men and 3 women. Without exception, these 10 figures were the core disciples cultivating on the trial peak. Moreover, all of them were full of energy and had powerful cultivations. All of them were actually at the ultimate 9th Will Emperor realm or above. The strongest among them had already reached the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. The arrival of Zhuowen and Yao Shuling immediately attracted the attention of the 10 people. When their gazes gathered on Zhuowen, they frowned slightly. This youth in front of them was too unfamiliar. They had never seen him before. Then, their gazes fell on Yao Shuling, who was being carried by Zhuowen. Then, the other 9 people all had strange gazes. They all stared at the youth in a dark blue robe sitting in the center. This youth's aura was the strongest among the 10 people. He had reached the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. His other identity was Yao Shuling's elder brother, Yao Yan. At this moment, Yao Yan's eyes narrowed. He stared at Zhuowen and said, "Who are you? Why are you carrying my sister?" "Oh, you're Yao Shuling's elder brother, Yao Yan? I was just looking for you." As he spoke, Zhuowen let go of Yao Shuling. The latter ran to Yao Yan's side in a panic. She stared at Zhuowen with reddened eyes. After all, she was a girl. Just now, Zhuowen had used such an indecent posture to carry her. How could she not feel humiliated? Now that she saw her elder brother, she felt even more wronged. Therefore, her eyes were clouded with a layer of mist. Seeing Yao Shuling like this, Yao Yan's gaze turned cold. He said coldly to Zhuowen, "How dare you treat Shuling like this? Are you looking for death?" "I'm not looking for death. I'm looking for you. Take me to the Enlightenment Cliff. The Enlightenment Cliff should be within the trial peak, right?" Zhuowen said calmly. "The Enlightenment Cliff? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How could someone like you enter the Enlightenment Cliff?" When Zhuowen mentioned the Enlightenment Cliff, a red-haired man sitting not far from Yao Yan coldly mocked. "I'll only give you one chance. Either speak or die," Zhuowen said coldly. An obscure killing intent slowly brewed. "What an arrogant brat. You dare to be so arrogant when you barge into my trial peak. See how I'll teach you a lesson." Zhuowen's words immediately caused the gazes of the 10 core disciples to become much colder. They stared at Zhuowen and became extremely unfriendly. Among them, the red-haired man sneered again and again. He directly jumped out and flew towards Zhuowen. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. Zhuowen's right hand suddenly stretched out, and then all the attacks on the red-haired man's body were destroyed. Then, one hand easily grabbed the man's neck and lifted him off the ground. I said, either speak or die. Since you don't want to speak, then die. Chapter 8:16. Holy Master. The crisp sound of bones cracking slowly rang out in the stone hall, causing the originally quiet atmosphere to become somewhat ear-piercing at this moment. The other 9 core disciples, including Yao Yan, stared blankly at the red-haired man in Zhuowen's hand. His neck was crooked to the side. Although the red-haired man was not the strongest among the 10 core disciples, he was not at the bottom either. He was also an ultimate 9th wheel emperor, and his cultivation was already stronger than most of the elders in Shenzhen. But now, in the hands of the young man before him, he had been easily crushed to death with a single move. Did you kill Lu Hua? Yao Yan asked with a cold gaze. Zhuowen did not waste any more words. With a stomp of his foot, the cultivation of the early Swordsmanship realm burst out. Countless streams of air surged out of Zhuowen's body like a tsunami, forming an upside-down waterfall. You are also from the Swordsmanship realm? Once Zhuowen's aura was released, Yao Yan and the others could easily see through Zhuowen's current cultivation. Their eyes were filled with shock. The 10 core disciples were the geniuses of Shenzhen. However, Yao Yan, who had the highest cultivation, was only in the early Swordsmanship realm. Moreover, Yao Yan was already 23 years old, but the young man in front of them was only 20 years old. He was 3 years younger than Yao Yan, but his cultivation was already the same as Yao Yan's. They all knew that the young man in front of them was much more talented than Yao Yan. You are not a disciple of Shenzhen? Yao Yan's eyes flashed as he stared at the young man in front of him. He knew very well that it was unlikely that such a young Swordsmanship realm prodigy would appear in Shenzhen. Even if Yao Yan knew about him, it was impossible for him not to know. You can say that. Hurry up and bring me to the Enlightenment Cliff. Otherwise, you know the consequences, Zhuowen said calmly. Yao Yan's face was gloomy. He said coldly, how dare you? You're not a disciple of Shenzhen, yet you dare to break into Shenzhen. You're courting death. And you want us to submit to you and listen to your commands in the Swordsmanship realm? Zhuowen didn't waste any more words. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body transformed into an afterimage as he flashed towards Yao Yan. Bastard, you actually dare to make a move. Everyone, let's capture this kid. He dared to kill our Shenzhen's core disciple. We definitely can't let him go. Yao Yan shouted. With a stomp of his foot, he flashed towards Zhuowen. The young man in front of him was also a warrior of the Swordsmanship realm. Yao Yan naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to challenge him alone. Naturally, they would have to besiege him and take him down. The other 8 core disciples nodded. They all took out their respective spiritual treasures and greeted Zhuowen. In the stone hall, Yao Shuling was still standing. At this moment, she was also a little stunned. Only now did she realize that the young man, who had just appeared in front of her, was actually a Swordsmanship realm expert, an existence at the same level as her brother. I underestimated him before. Yao Shuling shook her head, and her beautiful eyes contained a wisp of a complicated expression. Looking at the 9 people rushing towards him, Zhuowen's eyes were indifferent. With a flip of his hand, the bone spear appeared in his palm. At the same time, 3 pairs of thunder wings grew out of his back. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body transformed into an illusory thunder shadow. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Zhuowen immediately dodged the attacks of the 9 people. His figure flashed and arrived in front of a weaker man. With a shake of his bone spear, he swung it at the man's chest, causing him to spit out blood and fly backwards. Zhuowen's speed was too fast. With the support of 3 pairs of thunder wings, in addition to the Swordsmanship realm's support, Zhuowen's speed was far beyond that of those in the Swordsmanship realm. Even Yao Yan couldn't keep up with Zhuowen's speed at this moment. He could only watch as Zhuowen seriously injured him and the other 8 core disciples. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the 9 people besieging him, except for Yao Yan, were all hit by a powerful impact. They spat out large mouthfuls of blood and fell to the ground, rolling and struggling. They were seriously injured. Swoosh! With a flash of thunder, Zhuowen appeared in front of Yao Yan. He stared at the latter indifferently and said, "You are too weak. Take me to the Enlightenment Rock Wall, and you will suffer less. Hearing Zhuowen's somewhat arrogant words, Yao Yan's anger surged. They were all warriors of the Xuanzuan realm, but Zhuowen actually said that he was too weak. This was a silent contempt. That's not necessarily true. Yao Yan shouted angrily. Holding the flame feather fan spirit treasure, his right hand suddenly spun. Suddenly endless flames swept out and turned into a huge fire python that was dozens of feet long. Go! With a wave of the flame feather fan, the huge fire python roared and rushed toward Zhuowen. For a moment, the temperature of the entire stone hall rose. However, when the fire python swept through the air, a blue spear shadow flashed, and the fire python burst into countless sparks. Then Zhuowen instantly arrived in front of Yao Yan and fiercely swung the spear in his hand. Yao Yan didn't even have time to react. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest, and then his whole body flew out uncontrollably. He hit the rock wall around the stone hall and smashed a human-shaped hole. Whoosh! Yao Yan was struggling to get up when a cold light swept over. The tip of a bone spear was already in front of his roar. The sharp coldness caused Yao Yan to have goosebumps all over his body. Take me to the Enlightenment rock wall. Zhuowen's voice was cold and ruthless. Yao Yan was stunned. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him, who was also at the early stage of the Xuanzuan realm, would be so strong. Even the 9 core disciples were no match for him. Let go of my brother. Yao Shuling was stunned at first and then screamed. She came to Yao Yan's side and stared at Zhuowen with a pair of beautiful eyes. As long as you take me to the Enlightenment rock wall, I won't kill him. Zhuowen frowned. Yao Yan's eyes flickered and he sighed softly. Okay, I'll take you to the Enlightenment rock wall. However, you'll soon be known by the higher-ups of Shenzhen if you so brazenly break into the trial peak. At that time, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. You don't have to worry about that. I just want to go to the Enlightenment rock wall. Zhuowen said calmly. Seeing that Zhuowen was so stubborn, Yao Yan was helpless. He sighed and said, I'll take you there, but you can't make things difficult for us afterwards. Don't worry. If you take me to the Enlightenment rock wall, I won't hurt you. Zhuowen nodded and agreed. Then come with me. Yao Yan gritted his teeth and seemed to have made up his mind. He got up and walked towards the exit on the other side of the stone hall. Zhuowen followed closely behind. Yao Shuling and the other 8 core disciples followed behind Zhuowen with fear in their eyes. They kept a certain distance from the latter. The strength that Zhuowen had displayed just now made them feel a lingering fear. How could they get close to this demon in front of them? While Yao Yan was leading Zhuowen to the Enlightenment Cliff, the left and right protectors, as well as the 10 great elders, were standing respectfully in a grand hall at the peak of the sacred Master Mountain. At that moment, there was a stone statue flickering with golden light at the front of the hall. The left and right protectors, as well as the 10 great elders, were respectfully kneeling towards the stone statue. It was a rather strange sight. Kacha! The stone statue suddenly shattered, and a magnificent and imposing figure walked out. This person had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He had thick eyebrows and large eyes. His expression was solemn, and his eyes contained a flowing golden light. Lord Sacred Master. When this person appeared, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders all prostrated themselves on the ground and bowed piously. This man's identity was obvious. He was the master of Shenzhen. I have a general understanding of the matter that you have reported. That young man has indeed infiltrated our Shenzhen. Just now, I sense that 2 of the guardian elders of the trial peak have died. I'm afraid that it was done by that young man. The sacred master's voice was not loud, but it was extremely majestic. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. What? He actually dared to barge into the smelting trial peak, and even killed 2 guardian elders. This brat was simply too arrogant. Sacred Master, this kid must be captured and severely punished. Hearing this news, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders were all shocked. Their faces revealed a mixture of shock and anger. Zhuowen was too despicable. It was fine if he had infiltrated their Shenzhen, but he actually dared to kill their Shenzhen's people. Yes, this kid really needs to be severely punished. Let's go to the trial peak first, and see what this kid's motive is for infiltrating our Shenzhen. The sacred master's voice was very indifferent. It was impossible to tell what his emotions were. Lord Sacred Master is right. Let's go to the trial peak now. We must completely capture this arrogant kid. As he spoke, the sacred master led the left and right protectors, and left the sacred master's peak. They flew through the air, and flew towards the trial peak in the distance. Zhuowen silently followed behind Yao Yin. However, his eyes were constantly paying attention to his surroundings. The trial peak's terrain was extremely steep. Other than cliffs, there were steep slopes. The road was extremely bad. Moreover, along the way, there were very few people. It seemed that other than the 10 great core disciples, there were basically no other disciples on the trial peak. Perhaps it was because he noticed the puzzled look on Zhuowen's face. Yao Yin took the initiative to speak. Don't be puzzled. As the name suggests, the trial peak is used to train the sect's disciples. However, the trial peak is a major event within the sect. It only happens a few times a year. Only then will there be a sea of people, and the sect's disciples come to train. Usually, only us core disciples train on this peak. The other disciples do not have the qualifications to enter. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of relief. Soon after, he continued to silently follow behind Yao Yin. Seeing that Zhuowen did not speak, Yao Yin naturally did not ask for a rebuff. He also calmly led the way in front. Not long after, the group passed through a dark tunnel and arrived at the edge of a cliff. On the opposite side of the cliff, there was an extremely smooth rock wall. On the opposite side of the cliff is the Enlightenment rock wall. You can use the iron chain bridge to enter the cave on the opposite side of the Enlightenment rock wall. Inside there, you can greatly increase your comprehension ability. It is an important place in Shenzhen. Yao Yin stretched out his right hand and pointed at the edge of the cliff in front of them. There was a cold iron chain as he spoke indifferently. Zhuowen looked over, and indeed discovered that on the opposite side of the iron chain was a cave that was half the height of a person. It looked ethereal and mysterious. Boom! Chapter 817. Wall of Enlightenment. Is that the Lord Holy Master? Zhuowen and Yao Yin, as well as Yao Shuling and the rest, all raised their heads and looked over. They saw the dazzling figure standing in the air. Even the left and right guardians and the 10 great elders are here. Yao Yin and the rest also noticed the left and right guardians and the 10 great elders behind the Lord Holy Master. The shock on their faces became even more intense. The sect had actually sent out such a huge force. Could it be to capture this young man in front of them? Although they admitted that the young man in front of them was strong enough, it was not to the extent that the Lord Holy Master had to personally take him down. The 10 great elders should be able to take him down if they worked together. Wasn't this a little too much? Zhuowen raised his head slightly and looked past the left and right guardians. He fixed his gaze on the dazzling figure at the front, and his eyes narrowed. This person was very strong and gave him a strong sense of oppression. From the exclamations of Yao Yin and the rest, he knew that this dazzling middle-aged man was the Lord Shenzhen. The Lord Holy Master is not weak. He is actually an initial stage golden venerate. His strength is comparable to the strength of the Chao and Feng family masters. Xiao Hei's voice rang out slowly. Zhuowen's gaze became even more solemn, and at the same time, there was a hint of anticipation. Once he left the dragon vein, he would definitely make a trip to the Chao family, Feng family and Grand family. He would definitely not let go of the 3 family masters. He was very clear that Chao Ji and Feng Tian were both at the early stage of the Golden Exalt realm, while Grand Haohai was at the late stage of the Golden Exalt realm. Now that the Lord Shenzhen's strength was comparable to Chao Ji and Feng Tian's strength, he wanted to see how strong an initial stage golden venerate was. Xiao Hei, how confident am I in dealing with the Lord Holy Master? Zhuowen suddenly asked. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Hei said in a deep voice, You don't have a high chance of winning. However, if you can transform into your Dragon Man form, you might be able to fight against the Holy Lord. However, your chances of winning are still not high. However, your defense in the Dragonoid state is even more abnormal than the Nirvana Vairocana. It won't be that easy for the Holy Lord to kill you. Initially, Zhuowen had a look of disappointment on his face. However, after hearing Xiaohei's words, his eyes lit up again. He didn't expect the defense of a partially materialized dragonoid form to be so insane. Who are you? Why did you barge into my Shenzhen? Not only did you cripple Elder Nalan's cultivation, you even injured my 10 great elders and left and right protectors. The sacred leader looked down at Zhuowen. His thunderous voice was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. What? Crippling Elder Nalan's cultivation, and injuring the 10 great elders and left and right protectors? When the sacred leader said this, Dazzle and the others were stunned. They naturally knew who Elder Nalan was. He was only an ultimate 8-wheel emperor. It was understandable that he wasn't the young man in front of them. However, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders were all powerhouses of the Xuanzun realm. 12 Xuanzun realm powerhouses had joined forces, yet this young man still managed to injure them. Just how terrifying was this young man's strength? At this moment, the way Yao Yan and the others looked at Zhuowen changed. They finally understood why the sacred leader had personally come out. It was because this young man's strength was too terrifying. At present, only the sacred leader could suppress him. I originally didn't want to clash with your Shenzhen. Unfortunately, that Elder Nalan made things difficult for me time and time again. That's why I fought back. To tell you the truth, I came to Shenzhen for the Cliff of Enlightenment. You only need to let me stay in there for 3 years. After 3 years I will leave. Zhuowen raised his head. His eyes were as calm as water as he spoke indifferently. Your goal is the Cliff of Enlightenment? The sacred leader asked with narrowed eyes. That's right. Zhuowen nodded. The sacred leader's eyes flashed. It's not impossible for you to stay in the Cliff of Enlightenment for 3 years. However, you must join my Shenzhen. If possible, I am willing to give you the position of Great Protector. Your position is only below mine. Zhuowen was so young, yet he was able to defeat the 10 great elders and the left and right protectors. His future was limitless. Although Zhuowen had killed a lot of Shenzhen's people, the sacred leader's view of the bigger picture was far more grandiose than others. Such a genius was hard to come by in 100 years. He wasn't someone the rest of Shenzhen could compare to. The other geniuses and elders of Shenzhen could be nurtured with time and resources. However, a peerless genius like Zhuowen could only be found by chance. He wasn't someone who could be nurtured with time and resources. What, Lord Sacred Leader? How can you give the position of Great Protector to this kid? This kid is so young, and he even killed Shenzhen's elders and disciples. His character isn't good enough. How can you be so careless? As soon as the sacred leader said this, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders behind him stepped forward to persuade him. They wanted to prevent the sacred leader from making such a foolish decision. The sacred leader snorted coldly and said, I understand what happened at the mountain gate. It was all Nalan Xiong's fault. Such a monstrous genius actually planned to be driven out of the mountain gate. He even wanted to kill Nalan Hongyu. And you didn't distinguish right from wrong and directly attacked this little brother. In the end, it was you who relied on Shenzhen's power to bully the weak. Isn't that the case? Moreover, you are all elders. Even if you join forces, you still aren't a match for this little brother. Do you think you have the right to speak? As soon as the sacred leader said this, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders all fell silent. It seemed that the sacred leader, who had always been calm, was finally a little angry. After saying this, the sacred leader no longer paid any attention to the left and right protectors. He looked at Zhuowen with a smile and said, What does little brother think of my proposal? Zhuowen looked at the sacred leader in surprise. This person was quite broad-minded. He didn't care about what he had done before, and was instead so enthusiastic about recruiting him. Although he knew that the Holy Master had done this because he had taken a fancy to his powerful strength and talent, it remained that the Holy Master was stronger than him. However, to be able to do this, it could be said that he had done his utmost benevolence. Kid, accept the sacred leader's proposal. Anyway, your goal is to comprehend the momentum of heaven and earth in the Enlightenment rock wall. In 3 years, the demonic creatures will break out of the seal. At that time, you will need to rely on Shengzhen's power. So, becoming Shengzhen's great protector won't be bad for you, Xiao He suddenly said. After pondering for a moment, Zhuowen smiled and said, "The sacred leader is indeed magnanimous. You don't care about this one's crime of killing. This one is impressed. If the sacred leader doesn't mind, this one is willing to join Shengzhen. However, I have a free nature, and don't want to be commanded by others, so, kid, you're too much. The sacred leader has already given you the position of great protector. Don't you want to bear the corresponding responsibility?" The left and right protectors said with displeasure. The sacred leader waved his hand and shook his head. "It's fine. If you join Shengzhen, you will be one of Shengzhen's people. I won't restrict your personal freedom too much." "Then, thank you for your generosity, sacred leader." Zhuowen smiled and cupped his hands in respect. "Until now, I still don't know your name, little brother. Is it convenient for you to tell me?" The sacred leader smiled faintly. "Zhuowen." Hearing this, the sacred leader nodded and said to the left and right protectors and the 10 elders behind him, "From now on, Protector Zhuo will be the great protector of Shengzhen. As long as it doesn't harm Shengzhen's interests, you are not allowed to disobey his orders. Do you hear me?" The left and right protectors and the 10 elders heard this, and their expressions turned ugly. Originally, they had followed the sacred leader and wanted to see the sacred leader completely suppress Zhuowen. However, they did not expect that Zhuowen would become their immediate superior. Yao Yan and the others were also shocked. It seemed that the sacred leader valued this young man very much. He had actually given him the position of great protector. The sacred leader leaped to Zhuowen's side and smiled. "Protector Zhuo, since you want to step into the enlightenment cliff, I will personally bring you there." As he spoke, the sacred leader stepped onto the iron cable bridge and flew steadily toward the opposite cave. Zhuowen did not want to be outdone and followed closely behind. Soon, the two of them disappeared from everyone's sight. I really did not expect him to become the great protector. At the edge of the cliff, Yao Shuling stood next to Yao Yan. Her beautiful eyes stared at the gradually disappearing figure with a complicated expression. She did not know why, but she felt a trace of reluctance in her heart. At the same time, she also remembered the various things she had said to Zhuowen at the martial arts practice field. Now that she thought about it, she felt a sense of shame that she could not show her face. At that time, she had repeatedly said that the inner sect disciples were just good-for-nothings, and that only the core disciples were worthy of her. However, now the young man named Zhuowen was so powerful that even the 10 core disciples were no match for him. From the sacred leader's words, even the 10 elders and the left and right protectors had been defeated by him, and had been given the position of great protector by the sacred leader. Therefore, when she recalled the words and tone she had said, Yao Shuling's face was full of bitterness. The one who was truly unworthy was not Zhuowen, but her. "Sister, let's leave. This person is too far away from us. He is not in existence that we can come into contact with at our level." Yao Yan's sharp senses noticed that Yao Shuling's expression was not right. He shook his head and sighed with emotion. After entering the cave, Zhuowen discovered that there was actually another world inside. The space inside was extremely vast, like a hall. Inside the cave, there were rock walls that were as smooth as a mirror. On the surface of the rock walls, there were densely packed words that looked like ants. While staring at the words on the rock walls, Zhuowen seemed to be able to feel a strange power. His entire body was rooted to the ground. In his eyes, the motionless words on the rock walls seemed to be constantly swimming at this moment, like living tadpoles. How magical! Is this the Enlightenment rock wall? Feeling the strange feeling that the surrounding rock walls gave him, Zhuowen could not help but open his mouth to speak. The Enlightenment rock wall has all kinds of magical powers that can increase your comprehension ability. Although the effect is not as obvious as that of the mystic comprehending realm, it is a subtle effect that can be sustained over a long period of time. The sacred leader seemed to have noticed Zhuowen's surprise and explained faintly, nodding his head, Zhuowen also realized that the feeling that the Enlightenment rock wall gave him was similar to that of the mystic comprehending realm. However, it was not as strong. You should have comprehended the power of concept to the peak of perfection, right? Are you planning to rely on the Enlightenment rock wall to comprehend the power of heaven and earth? Chapter 8:18. Light Potential. Oh, why does the Holy Lord say so? Zhuowen asked cautiously as his eyes flashed. The Holy Lord didn't care about the cautious Zhuowen and smiled faintly. In front of the mountain gate, I sensed your battle with the left and right protectors. I know that you have grasped the peak of perfection spear intent. Your talent is indeed terrifying. Being able to comprehend the peak of perfection concept at such a young age is rare and commendable. On the other hand, above the concept energy was the illusory force of the heavens and earth. Didn't you enter the Enlightenment rock wall for this? Zhuowen frowned slightly. It seemed that the Holy Lord in front of him wasn't simple. He was actually so familiar with the concept force and the force of heaven and earth. He knew that Lu Hantian, as a heavenly venerate powerhouse, didn't know that there was an even more powerful force of heaven and earth in the concept force. Otherwise, Lu Hantian wouldn't have kept it from him. Don't be surprised. I once meditated in front of the Enlightenment rock wall for 100 years and comprehended a force of heaven and earth. This is my force. The Holy Lord waved his sleeve and countless lights flashed out, covering the entire stone hall. It was as if the entire world didn't exist at this moment. The only thing that existed was the endless blazing light. Within the light, Zhuowen was almost unable to open his eyes due to the piercing light. At this moment, a trace of hesitation and helplessness appeared in his heart. His entire body had nowhere to hide under this terrifying light. Whoosh! The light faded, and the world in front of him returned to the environment of the stone hall. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with confusion. Is this the force of heaven and earth? Zhuowen muttered to himself. His heart couldn't help but tremble. The heavens and earth were filled with dazzling light that sealed off all his senses, causing him to lose all contact with the outside world. He knew that if the Holy Lord attacked him at this time, he wouldn't be able to resist at all. He might even be killed by the Holy Lord. Thinking of this possibility, Zhuowen's back broke out in a cold sweat. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but tremble, and his face was extremely pale. This is the momentum of heaven and earth that I have comprehended. I call it the momentum of light. After all, there are countless elements in the world. If you can comprehend an element, you will be able to use that element. The Sacred Lord glanced at Zhuowen and explained. Light force. When Zhuowen recalled the feeling of helplessness he felt when he was surrounded by countless rays of light, he felt a wave of lingering fear. This light was so terrifying that it could actually seal a person's perception within countless rays of light. Moreover, the Sacred Lord was truly terrifying. Although he was only at the initial stage of the Golden Venerate realm, the Sacred Lord who had comprehended the light force was actually comparable to a heavenly venerate warrior. The momentum of the world had a terrifying effect on a martial artist's strength. Thinking back to how Zhuowen had wanted to challenge the Holy Lord, Zhuowen couldn't help but bitterly smile. If the Sacred Lord hadn't comprehended the light force, then Zhuowen would have the strength to fight. However, the Sacred Lord who had the light force could easily kill Zhuowen. Even if he used his Dragon Man form, it would still be difficult for him. Moreover, from what the Sacred Lord had said, the momentum of the world was just a general term. There were many types within it. For example, if the Sacred Lord had comprehended the light force, then there would definitely be wind force, fire force, thunder force, and so on. Zhuowen had comprehended spear intent. So if he had comprehended the momentum of the world, then it should be spear force. Sacred Lord, this one has killed many of your Shenzhen people. Not only did you give me the position of great protector, you even explained to me about the momentum of the world. I don't think there is such a selfless good person in this world. Suddenly, Zhuowen turned his head and stared at the Sacred Lord in front of him. His gaze became extremely dignified with a trace of suspicion. The Sacred Lord shook his head, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. The reason why this one is helping you is naturally because I have a motive. Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he stared at the Sacred Lord. He knew that the Sacred Lord was about to explain the reason. This world has existed for tens of thousands of years. At that time, there weren't humans in this world, but endless demonic creatures. These demonic creatures enslaved humans and fed on them. Humans were reduced to existences that were worse than pigs and dogs. They lived in humiliation. Until one person, a Taoist who rode a pale white dragon, arrived here. This person's methods were heaven-defying, and his strength was terrifying. When he attacked, countless demonic creatures were destroyed. Almost all the demonic creatures in this world disappeared. However, some demonic creatures led their descendants and hid in the depths of the earth. After the demonic creatures were destroyed, that Taoist didn't say a word and left this world. Since then, our human race has continued to multiply and grow stronger, dominating this world. At this point, the Sacred Lord's expression became even more troubled. He continued, "Unfortunately, after tens of thousands of years, the descendants of the demonic creatures underground have grown stronger and stronger. Their numbers have also increased. They are planning to invade the surface. The entrance to the demonic creature's seal is in my Shenzhen. The seal can only last for 3 years. After 3 years, the seal will be broken, and the demonic creatures will come out from underground and invade the surface. When that time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. Furthermore, these demonic creatures are extremely strange. Normal forces can't harm them at all. The only thing that can restrain them is the power of the universe. Although this one has comprehended the power of the universe, it is difficult for one person to take charge alone. I can't stop so many demonic creatures. However, Guardian Zhua, you have appeared." Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. No wonder the Sacred Lord was so enthusiastic about recruiting him. He wanted to invite him to fight against the demonic army 3 years later. However, Zhuowen soon had new doubts. He asked, "In this world, are you the only one who can comprehend the power of the universe? Can't other geniuses comprehend it?" The Sacred Lord shook his head and sighed. "Almost none. Every year, we recruit geniuses from the outside world. Unfortunately, in Shenzhen, other than the successor of the sect leader, the other cultivators can't comprehend the power of the universe. They can't even comprehend the power of the universe. I don't know why this happened." At this point, the Sacred Lord's eyebrows furrowed. It was obvious that he had a headache about this phenomenon. It was indeed strange that he was the only one who could comprehend the power of the universe. However, Zhuowen didn't find it strange. It seemed that this situation was arranged by the Zonglong Taoist. After all, there were so many humans in this world. If there were many people who could comprehend the power of the universe, then even if the demonic creatures invaded, they wouldn't be a threat to the human race. Then why would he, an outsider, need to come here to do the mission? The Zonglong Taoist's arrangement was obviously to let Zhuowen rely on himself to destroy the demonic creatures. The Sacred Lord should be the kind of person who would assist Zhuowen, similar to a key character in a game. Since ancient times, you are the first cultivator I have seen who has comprehended the concept of perfection. I know that you have a very high chance of comprehending the power of the universe. If you can comprehend the power of the universe, then the human race will have a better chance of defeating the demonic creatures in 3 years. At this point, the Sacred Lord's face turned red, and he became extremely excited. "But Sacred Lord, are you so sure that I can comprehend the power of the universe within 3 years?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. The Sacred Lord's face stiffened. He was so excited that he forgot about this. In the past, he had sat on the Enlightenment rock wall for 100 years before he comprehended the power of the universe. 3 years was indeed too short. You can only rely on luck. In the next 3 years, I will often come to this Enlightenment rock wall to explain the details of the power of the universe to you, as well as my comprehension, to help you comprehend it," the Sacred Lord said seriously. Zhuowen's eyes flashed, but his heart was a little excited. After all, the Sacred Lord was in existence who had comprehended the power of the universe. If he had the Sacred Lord's explanation and comprehension, It would be very beneficial for him to comprehend the power of the universe. The time needed to comprehend the power of the universe would also be greatly reduced. Protector Zhuo, feel the wonders of the Enlightenment rock wall first. This token is my personal token. If you have any questions, you can use this token to summon me, and I will immediately come to explain it to you. The sacred master tossed a black token to Zhuowen with his right hand, after which, he gave Zhuowen a few instructions before leaving the Enlightenment rock wall. TSK, your treatment is really generous. The great Shengzhen's sacred lord will come whenever you summon him. Xiao He had unknowingly appeared in Zhuowen's sea of consciousness. She sat on Zhuowen's shoulder and snickered. Zhuowen shrugged and said, "The sacred lord helping me is also helping him in Shengzhen. This is just an equal exchange." That's true. You can feel the wonders of the Enlightenment rock wall first. This thing is very rare in the outside world. Xiao He suddenly said in a serious tone. Nodding his head, Zhuowen came to the center of the Enlightenment rock wall and stared at the words on one of the walls. Suddenly, the words were like small tadpoles that wriggled continuously in his vision. The wriggling became more and more frequent. In the end, they completely broke away from the wall and shot into Zhuowen's vision. Zhuowen was stunned on the spot, and the confusion in his eyes became even more intense. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More and more small tadpole-like words broke away from the wall and surrounded Zhuowen's body. They entered Zhuowen's body through his acupuncture points, and Zhuowen gradually sank into a mysterious state of comprehension. Time gradually passed. It had been 3 months since Zhuowen had entered the Enlightenment rock wall. During these 3 months, the rumor that the sacred lord of Shengzhen had appointed a 20-year-old young man as the Great Protector gradually spread throughout Shengzhen. The position of the Great Protector was second only to the sacred lord. It had been vacant for a long time. No one had expected that the sacred lord would actually give the position to a 20-year-old young man. When they heard this news, many disciples in Shengzhen were in disbelief. However, even more were doubtful and jealous. They couldn't believe that a 20-year-old young man had the qualifications to become the Great Protector. This was simply impossible. Some people even secretly spread the news that the Great Protector was actually the sacred lord's illegitimate son. That was why the sacred lord was so biased and gave the position to the young man. Chapter 819. Blood Spear. The role of the Enlightenment rock wall was indeed very powerful. Inside, Zhuowen's perception was several times higher than usual. If he was in a good state, it could even reach 12 times higher. With the improvement of his perception, Zhuowen became more familiar with the concepts and the momentum of the world. Every once in a while, the Holy Lord would come to the Enlightenment rock wall to explain the details of the momentum of the world to Zhuowen. At the same time, he would answer Zhuowen's questions. During this period of time, Zhuowen's progress was great. Although he knew nothing about the momentum of the world, he had already comprehended the great perfection spear intent to the extreme. The Holy Lord had once said that if he wanted to touch the momentum of the world, he would have to thoroughly master the concept. Only by thoroughly comprehending the concept would it be relatively easier to comprehend the momentum of the world. Therefore, Zhuowen was not in a hurry to directly comprehend the momentum of the world. Instead, he silently experienced his own spear intent, wanting to thoroughly comprehend it before doing anything else. Inside the rock wall, a figure stood quietly with his eyes closed. He held a bone spear in his hand. Waves of blue spear shadows were like countless snakes, dispersing around his body. A strange blue color filled the entire interior of the rock wall, causing the entire rock wall to turn into a strange blue world. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, his eyes were already filled with a deep blue color. A sharp light flashed in his eyes as Zhuowen moved. Like a bolt of lightning, he turned into a series of blue afterimages. A spear thrust forward, and the blue spear intent erupted, condensing into a blue crystal. This crystal turned into a blue spear, and it froze in midair in the same posture as before. Zhuowen took a step, turned around and brandished the spear again. Every time he brandished it, he was able to display the power of the spear intent to the extreme, leaving behind a crystal spear shadow in midair. In 5 breaths of time, Zhuowen had brandished his spear hundreds of times, leaving behind hundreds of blue crystal spears around his body. Being within the 100 spears, Zhuowen's entire body was faintly discernible, appearing quite mysterious. After a year, I finally comprehended the spear intent thoroughly. At this moment, the might of spear intent is several times stronger than before. Looking at the hundreds of blue spears that were frozen in midair around him, Zhuowen revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth. With a stomp of his foot, the hundreds of blue spears were instantly crushed into blue powder. Good. To be able to completely comprehend spear intent in a year. Protector Zhua, your talent is indeed very strong. A clear voice rang out. The Saint Lord slowly walked out from the cave entrance, looking at Zhuowen with eyes full of admiration. In fact, this is all thanks to the experiences provided by Holy Master and the Enlightenment Rock Wall. Otherwise, I might not have been able to fully comprehend the spear intent so quickly. Zhuowen revealed a rare smile. The sacred leader shook his head and said, Protector Zhua, you are too modest. My experiences are just external aids. If one's perception is not enough, giving him my experiences would be like playing the lute to a cow. But you are different. Even with my experiences, you were able to completely comprehend spear intent in a year. This is rare and commendable. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded and did not discuss this topic too much. Instead, he changed the topic and said, This time, I have completely mastered spear intent. I should be able to try to comprehend the momentum of heaven and earth. Right? Yes. What you have comprehended is spear intent. Then, you should transform spear intent into spear force. This kind of weapon-type momentum of heaven and earth is very difficult to comprehend on your own. You must have the guidance of a predecessor. At this point, the sacred leader was a little embarrassed. His eyes flickered as if he was hesitating about something important. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. What the sacred leader said was correct. The momentum of heaven and earth contained many elements. Wind, fire, thunder, clouds, and other natural elements could be directly sensed. However, some of the more abstract elements such as sabers, spears, staffs, and so on could not be directly sensed. Therefore, this also made it extremely difficult for cultivators who comprehended these abstract elements to transform intent realm into force. Then, sacred leader, do you have any good methods to make it easier for me to comprehend spear force? Zhuowen frowned and asked. The sacred leader was hesitant at this moment. Finally, as if he had made up his mind, he said, Come with me to the sacred leader peak. I will take you to a place. That place will be very beneficial for you to comprehend spear force. After saying this, the sacred leader took a step and left the Enlightenment Rock Wall. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a thoughtful look as he followed the sacred leader. From the hesitant look on the sacred leader's face, it was obvious that the place he wanted to take him to this time was not ordinary. Moreover, it was likely to be a very important place to the sacred leader. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 streams of light flashed by, attracting the attention of many disciples and elders in the Shenzhen. Look, isn't that the sacred leader? I didn't expect the sacred leader to come out of the Enlightenment Rock Wall so early today. Over the past year, the sacred leader had frequently entered and exited the Enlightenment Rock Wall, which naturally attracted the attention of many disciples and elders. They also knew that the sacred leader was doing this because of the Great Guardian. Therefore, for a moment the Great Guardian, who many people had never seen before, became even more mysterious. There is another person beside the sacred leader. He seems to be a young man in his 20s. Moreover, this young man is flying side by side with the sacred leader. Who is he? It can't be that this kid is the mysterious Great Guardian, right? It is said that the Great Guardian is also a young man in his 20s. Everyone quickly noticed Zhuowen, who was standing beside the sacred master, and their expressions changed. They knew that only the mysterious Great Guardian could fly side by side with the sacred master at such a young age. Whoosh! The sacred leader and Zhuowen soon arrived at the sacred leader peak and stopped in the main hall at the peak. Let's go in, the sacred leader said. and took the lead to step into the main hall. The main hall was resplendent and dazzling. When they reached the depths of the main hall, Zhuowen saw a rather large room. The sacred leader came to the center of the room and took a step forward. The sound of mechanisms activating could be heard. Rumble. Then the entire room shook violently. Zhuowen clearly felt that this strange room was falling rapidly. The bottom of the room is hollow. When he felt the room falling, the first thing that came to Zhuowen's mind was an elevator. The principle was similar to the elevators on Earth, except that the room he was in was much larger and wider. After a while, an even more violent tremor came. Zhuowen almost lost his balance. Then the tremor disappeared and everything calmed down. Zhuowen knew that he had reached the bottom. Let's go out. As he spoke, the sacred lord came to the door and opened it. Following that, a slightly piercing ray of light swept over, causing Zhuowen to squint his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he discovered that there was a completely different world outside the door. This was a huge space, and the only color in this space was the mournful color of blood. Below the blood-colored space, there was a land of ruins. On the land of ruins, there were countless piles of white bones. It was an extremely strange scene. Sacred leader, where is this? Zhuowen's pupil shrank as he came behind the sacred leader. He was puzzled. The sacred leader did not speak. He just quietly stared at the blood-colored space with a touch of sadness in his eyes. After a long time, the sacred leader said, "This is an arena built by the demonic creatures. Those demonic creatures treated humans like livestock. Not only did they kill humans, but they also built this arena for humans to kill each other for entertainment." Speaking of this, the sacred leader's body trembled. The sadness in his eyes turned into anger. He knew very well that if the demonic creatures broke through this world in 2 years, then the fate of the human race would be the same as tens of thousands of years ago. He could not let this happen. Back then, there were naturally many brilliant geniuses in the human race. There were also many who had comprehended the general trend of the world. However, once the demons discovered such geniuses, they would basically adopt the means of obliterating them, slaughtering them to death before they could grow up. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he looked at the piles of bones in the blood-red space. He was shocked as well as furious. He was also a human, so he naturally felt furious and sorrowful when he saw so many of his kind being killed by demonic creatures. Look over there. That blood spear was left behind by a brilliant ancestor. That blood spear contains the spear force that ancestor comprehended. However, this ancestor's spear force has a very strong killing intent. You have to be careful. The sacred leader pointed with his right hand. At the end of his finger, there was a huge blood spear that was 20 feet tall. It was quietly inserted into the ground, and an obscure aura faintly seeped out from the blood spear. If you want to comprehend the spear force, then you must have the ability to pick up this blood spear. It contains the spear force that ancestor instilled in it. It will be very beneficial for you to comprehend the spear force. Speaking of this, the sacred leader's eyes became extremely solemn. He continued, however, this blood spear is filled with too much resentment and blood chi. If you are not careful, it is very likely that the resentment and blood chi will corrode your soul and cause you to go crazy. After speaking, the sacred leader looked at Zhuowen, as if he was asking for Zhuowen's opinion. Then I'll try. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He took a step forward and arrived before the blood spear. He carefully examined it. The sacred leader nervously followed behind Zhuowen. He was always ready. If anything happened to Zhuowen, he was ready to separate him from the blood spear. The surface of the blood spear was covered with blood-red veins. It looked extremely strange and terrifying. Furthermore, these veins were constantly wriggling, adding a hint of eeriness to it. Without any hesitation, Zhuowen grasped the blood spear with his right hand. Immediately, a terrifying resentment invaded Zhuowen's soul. It wanted to enter the space between Zhuowen's eyebrows and take over his soul. What terrifying resentment and blood chi. Unfortunately, I have the blood demon. Just as the resentment and bloody aura was about to enter Zhuowen's sea of consciousness, the green coffin on his back immediately emitted a suction force. The resentment and bloody aura were immediately absorbed by the green coffin without any resistance at all. Rise! With a shout, Zhuowen easily pulled out the blood spear. At the same time, he played with it with great interest. Chapter 820. Memories. Looking at Zhuowen playing with the blood spear, the sacred leader was still in disbelief. The blood spear that contained the resentment and blood qi of the ancestors was picked up by this young man just like that? The resentment within the blood spear was so terrifying that even he found it difficult to bear. However, Zhuowen was able to pull it out so easily, and even played with it with great interest. Seeing this scene, the sacred leader felt like he had been cheated. Sacred leader, this blood spear isn't as terrifying as you say it is, Zhuowen said with satisfaction as he waved the blood spear around. The corner of the sacred leader's mouth twitched when he heard this. He felt that Zhuowen's words were very infuriating. However, he temporarily restrained his emotions and said, "It seems that the blood spear is fated to be with you." Zhuowen laughed in his heart. If it weren't for the blood demon, it wouldn't have been so easy for him to bear the terrifying resentment within the blood spear. However, the moment he held the blood spear, Zhuowen found that the blood spear faintly contained a sharp and terrifying killing intent. This intent was very strong. Protector Zhua, this blood spear contains the memories of the ancestors. This ancestor was an existence that comprehended the power of the spear. You can send your thoughts into the blood spear. Perhaps there will be some useful experience for you, the sacred leader said. Nodding, Zhuowen no longer hesitated. He turned his thoughts into needle-like shapes and drilled them into the blood spear. Boom! The moment Zhuowen's mind entered the blood-red spear, an extremely terrifying spear force burst out from the blood-red spear. Immediately, countless blood-red spear shadows fell from the sky like a blood-red waterfall, sealing Zhuowen and the blood-red spear within. The sacred leader slowly took a few steps back. Looking at the countless blood spear shadows in front of him, his gaze was extremely serious. He muttered in a low voice, "What a terrifying spear power! I wonder if Protector Zhua can comprehend the true power of the spear from it. Fine. I'll stay here for a year. After a year, I'll go out to take charge of dealing with the demonic creatures. I hope you won't disappoint me, Enforcer Zhua." As the Holy Lord spoke, he sat down cross-legged not too far away from Zhuowen. His eyes quietly stared at Zhuowen within the blood-red spear shadow. If anything happened to Zhuowen, he would immediately move to stop him. There were only 2 years left before the demonic creatures broke the seal, so he could only stay here for a year. A year later, he would gather all the human powerhouses in Shenzhen and prepare to resist the incoming demonic army. This was a land of blood. As far as the eye could see, it was filled with the color of blood. Above the land of blood, there was a pitter-patter of rain. This rain was blood. This world was a world of blood. Everything in sight was filled with the color of blood, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Walls that were several dozen meters tall surrounded the bloody soil. The walls were blood-red and covered in strange blood-red inscriptions. They were filled with a strange power. On top of the high walls was a ring-shaped seating platform. Its shape was very similar to the Colosseum of ancient Rome. On the platform sat many tall and ferocious creatures. These creatures were not humans. They had pitch-black scales and sharp horns on their foreheads. They were 3 meters tall and had blood-red eyes. These ferocious creatures opened their blood-red eyes and looked down at Zhuowen, who was below the high walls. To be more precise, they were not looking at Zhuowen, but at the area behind Zhuowen. Turning around, Zhuowen looked behind him. There were iron fences, and within the iron fences was a dark iron prison. In Zhuowen's eyes, these iron fences imprisoned humans in tattered clothes. There were men and women, but most of these humans had dull eyes. It was as if they were numb and had no attachment to this world. Is this the past of the blood-red space from 10,000 years ago? Looking at the scene around him, Zhuowen quickly understood. These scenes should be the memories from 10,000 years ago in the blood spear. Now his consciousness was reading these memories that few people knew of from 10,000 years ago, as if he was watching a movie. The ferocious creatures on the platform on the high walls should be the extremely terrifying demonic creatures from 10,000 years ago. They enslaved humans, killed them, and even tortured them. They treated them like livestock. Looking at the apathetic humans behind the iron fence, as well as the demons laughing and cursing on the high wall, Zhuowen's heart suddenly couldn't help but burst into a monstrous rage. This rage was the sorrow and anger of seeing his own race being enslaved and slaughtered by another race. Zhuowen himself was a human, but now seeing his own race being treated like this by a group of monsters that were neither human nor ghost, how could he not be angry and indignant? Kill, kill, kill. Human livestock, if you want to live, then kill each other at all costs. Haha. On the high walls, the demonic creature's hoarse and unpleasant voice sounded. Then the iron fences were all opened. One by one, the numb humans slowly walked out of the iron fences. Clang, clang, clang. Weapons of different shapes and sizes fell from the sky and stabbed into the bloody ground. The humans who walked out of the iron fence stared at the weapons in front of the bloody ground in a daze. They were still motionless as if time had stopped. Don't kill? If the 20 of you don't kill, all of you will die. If you kill each other, the winner can live. Only one can live. Choose, either all of you die, or only one of you survives. The demonic creature's voice sounded again. It was like thunder, echoing in the sky above the bloody ground. Pitter patter patter. The blood rain fell again, and it was getting heavier and heavier. The entire space was dyed red. The 20 humans still didn't move. Their eyes were still numb, and they just let the blood rain fall on their bodies. Good. Since you don't kill, then I will kill all of you. The demonic creature's voice became angry. It was about to attack. Kill. However, just as the monster was about to attack, a shrill cry rang out. A young man sobbed as he rushed out from a corner. He pulled out an ordinary-looking spear from the bloody soil and charged towards another middle-aged man beside him. The middle-aged man was in a daze. He looked at the young man who was rushing toward him. He remained motionless and just looked at the young man quietly. Puchi! The long spear pierced through his chest. The middle-aged man took a few steps back and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, a peaceful smile appeared on his face. He looked at the young man and said, "Thank you. Do your best to live." With that, the middle-aged man fell to the ground. His breath gradually weakened, and he finally died. The young man was stunned. He held the long spear with both hands. A stream of blood flowed from the middle-aged man's body into the young man's hands. It was the first time he realized that blood could be so hot. However, his heart turned cold. Because of his cowardice and fear of death, he killed someone. Moreover, he killed an innocent person. Plop! The young man sat on the ground and cried hysterically. Accompanied by a rain of blood, his cries filled the entire arena. It was mournful and helpless. Good, good, good. You're a good man. Pick up the spear again and kill the other 18 people. Otherwise, it won't be just the 18 people who will die. You will die too. If you want to live, you have to kill the others. The countless demonic creatures on the high platform laughed, as if the scene just now was very funny. To them, the human race killing each other was a comedy that made them convulse with laughter. The young man looked up and stared at the countless demonic creatures on the high platform. He slowly stood up and stopped crying. A deep resentment grew in his eyes. It was all because of these demonic creatures. Otherwise, why would he and the others fall to this point? I can't die. I have to become stronger. Strong enough to kill these demonic creatures. Wiping the tears from the corner of his eyes, the young man gently put down the middle-aged man's body and pulled out the long spear. His eyes were filled with determination. He couldn't die. He had to become stronger. He had to make these demonic creatures pay the price. Puchi! Puchi! The young man's attacks became cold-blooded and ruthless. The sluggishness in his eyes was no longer there. It was replaced with indifference and resentment. He knew that the only thing he could do now was to kill these innocent people of his own race. After the young man killed the last person, he came to a corner and suddenly vomited. The sorrow and self-blame in his eyes became even more intense. Although his only choice was to kill, how could he feel good whenever he remembered that the people who died in his hands were his own race? Good job. Human, what's your name? To be able to raise the weapon in your hand and kill your own race. We demonic creatures agree with your shamelessness. Haha. A demonic creature asked loudly with a mocking tone. Planting the long spear on the ground, the young man's eyes became unprecedentedly determined. He did not answer the demonic creature's question. It doesn't matter if you don't answer. You did well today. You've survived. There's still a battle tomorrow. If you want to struggle at death's door, then continue to kill. Kill your fellow clansmen, and live on in their resentment. Haha. Countless demonic creatures roared with laughter. They looked at the young man, as if they were looking at a joke. That's right, killing their own race was very funny to them. Time passed day by day. The young man appeared in the arena every day. Every time, he would be able to stand at the end and kill everyone else. The ordinary long spear in the young man's hand gradually turned blood red and became a blood spear. The young man became more and more indifferent. His heart was like steel. No matter who his opponent was, he would kill them with a single spear. The only hope in his heart was to live on. He would live on just like that. On this day, the iron fence opened once again. The young man slowly walked out with a blood spear in his hand and a cold gaze in his eyes. Stepping on the bloody ground, the young man's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. This was because he realized that there was only one person on the bloody ground today. Usually, there would be more than 10 people appearing at the same time. It was the first time that only one person had appeared today. When the young man raised his head, and his gaze fell on the figure on the ground, his pupils shrank and his body trembled. It was a young girl. Although she was wearing a coarse short skirt made of animal skin, and her hair was slightly disheveled, it still could not hide the girl's snow-white skin and delicate face. Shuiyao. Chapter 821. Shuiyao Shuiyao. Shuiyao. Why is it you? The youth's cold gaze finally changed. It turned into disbelief, fear, and weakness. The girl in front of him was called Shuiyao. She was his childhood sweetheart and his little sister. The youth still could not forget that the little girl who liked to cry, stick to him, and call him big brother was standing in front of him at this moment. Moreover, she was standing on the opposite side of the arena. Big brother! Big brother! Shuiyao's watery eyes were filled with helplessness. At this moment, she coincidentally saw the youth kneeling on one knee with the blood spear in his hand. The youth's face gave her a familiar feeling. It was the gentle face of her big brother that she had looked up to many times in the past. The big brother, who had always protected her, was right in front of her eyes. Therefore, she unconsciously called out. Hearing this call, the youth's entire body trembled. The arm holding the blood spear violently trembled for the first time. He tightly bit his lower lip and roared. Why? Why is it Shuiyao? Oh, a shameless person who kills people like scything flax can actually feel pity for his little sister? Haha, this is the first time I've seen you show such an expression. The demon sitting at the front suddenly laughed. His laughter was very evil. As long as you kill this girl, you'll be free in the future. You won't have to fight in the arena every day to survive. As long as you kill this girl, you'll be free. Go kill her. The demon patiently guided the youth. The mocking expression on his face became even more intense. The other demons also revealed expressions of interest. When they released the youth, they already knew that the youth's opponent today was his little sister. They really wanted to see if the youth who killed people like scything flax would pick up the blood spear blade in his hand and kill his little sister. Kill her! Kill her! On the high wall, all the demonic creatures stood up and roared. Their crimson eyes were fixed on the young man below. Shuiyao's delicate body trembled, especially when she saw the ferocious demons on the high wall. Her entire body went limp on the ground. Her beautiful eyes were filled with mist as she stared at the youth in front of her and said, Big brother! I'm scared, I'm so scared. When he heard Shuiyao's trembling voice, the young man's entire body trembled while his breathing became hurried. Especially when he saw Shuiyao's helpless gaze. The young man felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. He still remembered that whenever Shuiyao said that she was scared, she would always hug his arm. That way, she would feel at ease. At that time he would always say, Don't be afraid, I'll protect you. But now he couldn't bring himself to say those words. He could only stare at his own hands, which were stained with the blood of his own kind. He had killed innocent people of his own kind. He had struggled at death's door for so long under the mockery of the demonic creatures. Did he still have the ability to protect Shui Yao? Do I still have the qualifications? Kill her, or both of you will die. You should know the rules of the Colosseum. The demonic creature's voice gradually turned cold, and strands of killing intent spread out from it. Why her? Couldn't it be someone else? Why her? The young man raised his head and roared in a slightly hysterical manner. Why did these demonic creatures choose Shui Yao? Why did they choose the little sister that he had sworn to protect? Why her? Because we did it on purpose. Haha, we did it on purpose. Your fate is in our hands, and you have to kill whoever we tell you to kill. You're just a chess piece for us to amuse ourselves. The indistinct demonic creature suddenly roared with laughter, and its voice was piercing and merciless. After that, it suddenly turned cold and said, "If I tell you to kill her, then you have to kill her. If you don't, then all of you can die. Kill her, and you'll be truly free." The demonic creature continued to tempt him. They needed an even more exciting performance. The young man's repeated victories in the Colosseum had made the demonic creatures sick of watching him. So they needed an even more exciting performance. So they had specially investigated the young man's background and found the young woman, Shui Yao, whom the young man had relied on since he was young. She was the existence that the young man was determined to protect. They really wanted to see what sort of expression the young man would have when he killed the little sister that he was determined to protect. They wanted to see the young man in pain and humiliation, and they wanted to see the young man go mad. Perhaps that would be the only way to stimulate them. At this moment, Shui Yao had gradually recovered her calm, especially when she saw the young man kneeling on the ground with a face covered in pain. Shui Yao's heart suddenly ached for him. Shui Yao slowly walked over to the young man's side. At this moment, she seemed to have forgotten her fear. She squatted down and cupped the young man's face while a gentle smile appeared on the corners of her mouth. "Big brother, you've always protected me in the past. Shui Yao wants to protect you this time as well. This is the first time that I've seen you reveal such fear. Don't be afraid." Shui Yao's smile grew brighter and brighter. Her icy cold hand gently stroked the young man's face, while the gentleness in her beautiful eyes was like water that was about to drip down. The young man raised his head and gazed at the young woman who was smiling gently. His heart was trembling, and then he slowly calmed down and said, "Shui Yao, Big brother said that I would always protect you, so I'll always protect you." The young man smiled as well. Right, why did I work so hard to survive? Now he finally understood. He was worried about the young woman before him, and he wanted to see her smile once more. Now that he had seen it, he could die with no regrets. If he could only live alone, he would of course choose Shui Yao. He had said that he would protect her. As he spoke, the young man slowly stood up and gently pulled out the blood-red spear. The sharp tip of the spear slowly approached his neck, while his gaze was fixed on the young woman in front of him. He wanted to see the young woman's face more in his final moments. He wanted to remember the young woman's face forever. Slash. The sound of the spear piercing into flesh slowly rang out. Fresh blood dripped onto the bloody ground. At this moment, it seemed to have become tender and beautiful. The young man was stunned. His right hand was tightly held by a pair of small, fair hands. The blood-red spear had not pierced his neck, but had instead pierced through Shui Yao's abdomen. Just as the young man was about to die, Shui Yao suddenly grabbed his right hand and leaned her delicate body towards the tip of the blood-red spear. In the end, the blood-red spear pierced through Shui Yao's body. The young man, who was used to seeing blood, stared blankly at the blood flowing out of Shui Yao's body. The blood flowed along the spear and stained the young man's right hand. Looking at this scene, the young man could not help but think of the middle-aged man he had killed for the first time. That middle-aged man's blood had stained his hands for the first time. Today, the blood of the little sister he had always wanted to protect had also stained his hands. "Big brother. Finally, I'm no longer the one being protected. I've also protected you. Am I very powerful?" Shui Yao held the blood-red spear. Her pretty face was devoid of color, as she smiled at the young man with a tranquil and satisfied expression. Following the long spear, Shui Yao slowly walked towards the young man. A pool of blood had already gathered beneath her feet. At this moment it was a poignant sight. Finally, Shui Yao stopped in front of the young man. Her blood-stained right hand gently pulled the young man into her embrace. She smiled softly and said, "Big brother, live well." Then, the young man realized that Shui Yao's body was gradually turning cold. The weak breathing by his ear had also completely stopped at this moment. "Live well," the young man softly murmured. His hands also hugged Shui Yao's delicate body. 2 streams of blood flowed from his eyes. "Live well, live well." The young man continuously repeated this sentence. The grief on his face became even more intense. "Haha, well done. This is truly a tragedy for the human race. You've done well. We're very happy. You don't have to fight in the arena anymore. You're free now. Haha." On the high platform, all the demonic creatures stood up and cheered and jumped for joy. They had not expected the scene just now. They had not expected that the timid young girl, Shui Yao, would choose to end her life in such a way. However, it was precisely because they had not expected this that it gave the demonic creatures a great surprise. They were very satisfied and very happy that the young man had obtained his freedom. The young man gently laid Shui Yao flat on the ground. He looked up at the demonic creatures who were roaring with laughter on the high platform. He just watched quietly. At the same time, a blood-red energy surged out from the young man's body and surrounded him. "Freedom? You said you'll set me free." The young man's lips suddenly curled into a mocking smile. Instantly, the blood-red energy became more and more intense. The blood-red energy adhered to the young man's body and turned into a blood-red armor. Rumble! The huge bloody earth in the arena suddenly trembled. Then, the blood that had accumulated in the bloody earth for many years swept out and turned into a monstrous sea of blood that surrounded the young man's body. Is that the power of the blood spear? Zhuowen, who had been watching from the side, could not help but exclaim when he saw the terrifying power that erupted from the young man's heart due to his grief and indignation. The demonic creatures' laughter gradually stopped. They looked down at the young man in the sea of blood with shock in their eyes. "How dare you? What are you trying to do? Don't tell me that you dare to break the rules of the arena and attack us?" The leading demonic creature's eyes were cold as he shouted loudly, "Die! All of you deserve to die!" The young man shouted. He stomped his foot and waved the blood spear in his hand. A boundless sea of blood gushed out and immediately engulfed the demon that had just spoken. With a miserable scream, the demon exploded into a cloud of blood mist in the sea of blood. It couldn't be more dead than this. What's going on? How did this young man suddenly become so terrifying? Seeing the demonic creature that had been killed in an instant, the other demonic creatures gasped and got up to leave the arena. "All of you stay here and die." The young man roared angrily at the sky. The boundless sea of blood filled every corner of the arena. The demonic creatures on the high platform all exploded into a bloody mist in the sea of blood. They did not have the strength to resist at all. In an instant, the huge arena was empty. Only the young man was left standing in the middle of the arena. Dang dang dang. The young man came to Shui Yao's side and gently caressed her cheek. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "It's all my fault for realizing it too late. Shui Yao, I'm sorry. I'll always be by your side." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.